إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So welcome today to this lecture, which is on the topic of atheism, its causes and its cures. And this was really a lecture on short notice. The topic itself is deep and complex and requires a lengthy treatment. So what we're going to try to do today, inshallah ta'ala, is just try to introduce the topic and try to understand some of the history behind how mostly the Western nations, how they operate and how they run, which is based upon these ideas of naturalism, materialism, atheism, and just look at the brief history behind how they have come to this scenario or this situation, and looking at some of the causes as to why Muslims are affected by atheism, why they become apostates. And through that we will understand the causes of the problem, and also at the same time understand how to remedy the problem by looking at the underlying causes. So I want to start today by reading from this excellent work by Imam Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the great scholars from the last century. He died in 1376 Hijrah, around the 1950s, I believe, mid of the last century. And in general, he has really good works in relation to this topic of contemporary ideologies and philosophies and atheism, and a lot of benefit can be taken from his writings, especially in those works where he extracts benefits from the likes of Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim, and some of the great scholars of the past. Now this is one of those such books, Al-Adillatul Qawati' wal-Barahin fi Ibtali Usul al-Mulhidin, which is, in general, the meaning is definitive evidences and proofs for the falsification, for the invalidation of the foundations of the atheists. And what he's done in this book is he presents 83 points, 83 principles or points of refutation against some of the foundations upon which atheism itself is built. Now, I want to start with the introduction because it is a beautiful introduction, a nice way to introduce our topic today, inshallah ta'ala. So after praising Allah and sending salat and salam upon the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, أما بعد, to proceed, فإن الله تعالى بعث رسله مبشرين ومنذرين وجعلهم الهداة والأئمة إلى كل علم صحيح نافع ودين صحيح وإلى كل صلاح وخير. He said, to proceed, indeed Allah the Most High, He sent His messengers as those who bring good news and those who warn, and He made them to be guides, meaning those who guide, and as leaders that direct the people to every sound beneficial knowledge, and to everything in which there is rectification and goodness. Okay, so the prophets and messengers, what do they come with? They come with sound knowledge, and they come with beneficial action. Keep this in mind, because it will be significant when we come later on to look at how these societies, how they operate and how they function. So the messengers and prophets bring sound knowledge and beneficial action in which there is rectification for the individual and likewise for the society. So this is in general, this is what the prophets and messengers come with. Then he says, وَخَصَّ مُحَمَّدًا صلى الله عليه وسلم بأن جعله خاتمهم وإمامهم. So he made Muhammad sallallahu very special and specific in the sense that he made him to be the seal of all the prophets and messengers, and the Imam, the leader of all the prophets and messengers. وَأَنزَلَ عَلَيْهِ الْكِتَابِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, and he revealed upon him the book and the wisdom. So these are two things, the book and the wisdom. فِيهِمَا الْهُدَى وَالْحَقِّ وَالنُّورِ. So within the book and the wisdom is guidance and truth and light. وفيهما العلوم النافعة والحقائق الصادقة والأخلاق الفاضلة والأعمال الصالحة والآداب العالية. What does the book and the wisdom contain that Muhammad ﷺ that he came with? What does it contain? It contains beneficial sciences and truthful realities. It speaks truthfully about realities and virtuous qualities, akhlaq, mannerisms, and righteous deeds, righteous actions which are beneficial, and lofty etiquette, al-adab al-aliyah, lofty etiquette, lofty manners. So, because the book and the wisdom came with all of these five things, then every type of knowledge, every type of perfection returns back to the book and the wisdom. Everything which is ilm, sound knowledge, everything in which there is wisdom, it always refers back to the book and the wisdom, because that's the fountain and the foundation of everything. From it springs everything. Beneficial sciences, beneficial conduct, beneficial laws, lofty mannerisms, lofty traits, lofty qualities, and so on and so forth. So within the book and the wisdom, Allah and the Messenger have explained all of the masail, all of the issues, the knowledge-based issues, the evidences, the realities, the things that bring about certainty, the things which are definitive evidences. So whoever looks and understands, he will find all of that in the book and the wisdom. Whoever holds fast to them both, to the book and the wisdom, and guides himself by them, then he will be happy in this life and the next. وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْهُمَا أَوْ عَارَضَهُمَا. And as for the one who turns away from them or who clashes with them, then he will ضَلَّ عَنِ الْهُدَى, he will be misguided away from guidance. وَالشَّقِيَ, he will be wretched, and he will fall into basically loss and ruin. So after this introduction, establishing that the prophets and messengers and the books that they bring these affairs of beneficial knowledge and righteous action. Then he says, وَأَعْظَمُ النَّاسِ إِنْحِرَافًا عَنْهُمَا. The greatest of people who deviate from the book and the wisdom, the greatest of those, مَلَاهِدَةُ الْفَلَاسِفَةُ وَالزَّنَادِقَةُ الْدَهْرِيِّينَ, which are the atheists who are philosophers, and what we call the Dhahiriyyah, which are basically the ones who believe that matter is eternal, the universe is eternal, and there is no resurrection, there is no hereafter. So they basically believe that life and death just continue in a cycle, and there's no creator. And so they are known as the Dhahiriyyah, which we shall speak of shortly, inshallah ta'ala. So these people, they are the greatest of enemies and the greatest of disputants, and who swerve away from the book and the wisdom. As he says himself to Shaykh, وَهُمْ أَكْبَرُ أَعْدَاءِ الرُّسُلِ. They are the greatest of the enemies of the messengers. فِي كُلِّ زَمَانٍ وَمَكَانٍ. In every time and in every place. This is true. Today the greatest of the enemies to Islam are and to religion in general. So it's not just Islam. They are against Christianity. They're against Judaism. Anything which has attachment to a revealed book. The greatest of the enemies are these types of atheist philosophers and the Dhahiriyyah, the materialists or the existentialists, the naturalists, those kind of people. and they are the most evil of creation. الدعاة إلى الضلال والشقاء. They are the people who invite to misguidance and to wretchedness, because he says فَإِنَّهُمْ تَصَدُّوا لِمُحَارَبَةِ الْأَدْيَانِ كُلَّهَا, because they have put themselves forward, they have specifically come out and set aside their time, effort, resources, money, everything in order to combat religion in general. And Shaitan has beautified for them the various sciences by which they rejoice. Right? So these people, they have shubuhat, they have misconceptions, they have doubts, they have conjectures upon which they build their war or their battle against the revealed books and the sent messengers. So he says, Shaitan has beautified for them their sciences by which they rejoice, and on account of which they have belittled or looked down upon what the messengers came with. And then he mentions an ayah in the Quran, فَلَمَّا جَاءَتْهُمْ رُسُلُهُمْ بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ فَرِحُوا بِمَا عِنْدَهُمْ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ, that when the messengers came to them, meaning the disbelieving nations, those people, they rejoiced with whatever they possessed of knowledge. Right, this is in Surah Ghafir, Surah 40, verse number 83. So whenever the messengers came to their respective people, those people would rejoice in whatever sciences, whatever knowledge they had with them. And this again is true in our time, as we shall discuss inshallah ta'ala, the very sciences of the disbelievers and how they have convinced the people that these are certainties, unquestionable certainties, which cannot be denied. And by this they deceive the people and rejoice with the knowledge that they have. So he continues, وَحَاقَ بِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا بِهِ يَسْتَهْزِئُونَ. However, at the end of the affair, what happened to those past nations is that the things that they used to mock at, they would mock the believers who believed in the unseen. They would mock the believers who believe in resurrection and accountability and affairs of this nature. Their mockery fell back upon themselves, and whatever power they had, authority they had, knowledge they had, sciences they had, technology they had, all of that was unable to save them when the punishment of Allah Azza wa Jal, when it finally came upon them. وَحَاقَ بِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا بِهِ يَسْتَهْزِئُونَ. And then he says, وَقَدْ أَصَّلُوا لِبَاطِلِهِمْ أُصُولًا يُقَلِّدُ فِيهَا بَعْضُهُمْ بَعْضًا. He said that they have established for their falsehood many false foundations in which they blindly follow each other. They blindly follow each other in these false foundations upon which they build their atheism and naturalism and so on and so forth. And he says, وَهِيَ فِي غَايَةِ الْفَسَادِ. They are the essence or the extremity of corruption. He says, it is sufficient for the intelligent person to simply just to think about them in his mind, for him to establish evidences for their futility, to invalidate them, because they oppose al-aql, they oppose sound reason, and they oppose naql, they oppose sound revelation. But however, they have simply beautified them. That's all they've done. They've beautified them, and they have spread them amongst the people, and as a result of which most of the creation have become deceived. So this is a beautiful introduction from Imam Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, and the rest of the book is simply an elaboration point by point to refute the various foundations. So perhaps that is a subject of another series of lessons. So once this is clear, we've taken from this introduction now from Imam Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala that the prophets and messengers, they come with beneficial knowledge, righteous action, and they bring with them beneficial sciences and establish evidences in the clearest and the most apparent of ways. And the greatest of the enemies to these prophets and messengers are the philosophers, atheists, naturalists, and the materialists. And they've existed for many, many centuries or millennia. They're not something new. They've always been very, very, very small in number. Well, that's the difference. They've been very, very small in number. However, for various factors in the past century or so, they have increased tremendously, and we should look at the reasons for that, inshallah ta'ala. So after the statement of Imam Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, we want to move on to another statement from one of the contemporary scholars, Shaykh Saleh Aal, حفظه ta'ala. And in this statement, the question he was asked was just generally about evil and sin and disobedience becoming commonplace within Muslim nations, and why the scholars and the rulers don't appear to be doing anything about that. And he gives a lengthy answer. The first part of the answer, I'll quickly summarize. He basically says that there are certain times and situations in which the affair goes beyond the control of the scholars or the rulers. Right? There are certain times and places in which Allah Azza wa Jal, when He wants to bring a trial and tribulation to an entire nation, then it is an affair that goes beyond the ability of the scholars or the rulers to really stop this tribulation or this trial. Why? Because this is Allah Azza wa Jal bringing His trial to a people. Right? Now this question was in the context of, some of the Muslim lands, such as, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries and those places where you see now that the people, it's something that the people, their hearts have been turning to for a very long time. Right? So in those societies, there are two types of people. There are those people who benefited from the scholars and the presence of the masajid, and from the admonitions in the sermons, and from the general goodness you can find in those societies. Right? There is Tawheed, there is Sunnah, there are scholars admonishing, there are reminders, and it's all around. You can't really escape from it. It's all around you. Right? The khair, the goodness. So there are some people who benefited from their iman. They have iman, and then they took the opportunity to benefit from that iman, in the sense that they went to knowledge, they went to scholars, they went to the masajid, and likewise they inculcated their families upon with this nurturing, right, to keep away from the evil. So there are some people in that nation who are like that. There are other people in that nation who, when the doors began to open to evil and filth and tribulation, so for example, that would be the cultures of Western nations, the music, the Hollywood, and all of the baggage which comes with it, right? The imitation of the artists and the actors and the actresses and the whatever else, right? And just the enjoyment of pleasures and, all the frivolity and everything. There are some people who were drawn towards that, right? Whilst they're in the midst of all of this sea of goodness. So over time, that society, more and more of that society begins to turn to these kind of things. Even though it's difficult for them to access these things, just because of the society is generally religious. So now what happens is, when a people, they persist and persist in wanting and pursuing those things, then a time will come when Allah Azza wa Jal will open up the doors of tribulation for them. So there will then be two types of people in that society. Those people who benefited from the iman and from whatever was available to them. So now they are the ones who will be protecting themselves even more. And the other party will be those who basically wanted what they wanted. So now Allah Azza wa Jal has opened up the door for them and given them what their hearts wanted. Right? They chose misguidance for themselves because that is what their hearts actually were pursuing. So the point being, in this question, what Shaykh Saleh Aal is saying is in answering this question as to why is it that the scholars and the rulers are not doing anything, we see so much evil and tribulation. Well, this matter goes beyond, this is the action of Allah Azza wa Jal. It goes beyond what the scholars and rulers are able to do. And, we see in this the action of Allah, the wisdom of Allah. And this is something that is so vast on such a scale that the Shaykh is saying that because you have all of these affairs such as the internet, the TV, the satellite and so on and so forth, it's beyond the ability of even any nation, even Western nations cannot control the influence that is coming by way of this, this technology and this access and whatever. So we can clearly see that this is something by which whole nations are being put to trial. And not just Muslim nations, even Western nations are being put to trial. And so even as you see in the Western nations, where there are Jews and Christians and so on and so forth, even those nations are being put to trial because there are things that they don't like you have the homosexual movement, right? You have the transgender movement. All these movements that are appearing, they come from atheism and naturalism. They don't have a basis in revealed books, right? They are coming from everything that comes from atheism, naturalism, materialism, lifestyle philosophies, and so on and so forth. This is where the root of these things come from. And so now you see even these, what used to be traditionally Christian family value societies, right? They are being affected by the likes of this. So the point being, after answering this question, he comes to the end of this, which is what I wanted to quote. He says, look, how do we deal with these kind of situations where there are tribulations engulfing the whole society? He says that you must establish Iman into the hearts of the people. You have to implant this Iman and make it firm in the hearts from a very young age, right? Then he says, as a side point, I want to add a footnote to this point here. He says, لا تتساهلون بانتشار الإلحاد. Do not be lax about the spread of atheism. He says it again, لا تتساهلون بانتشار الإلحاد. Do not be lax about the spread of atheism. He says you will see two types of atheism, whether it is al-ilhad al-nafi or ilhad al-shak. Because there's two types of atheism. One is which is just clean negation, and one which is just the spreading of doubt. Right? He says both these two types, you see them, they are spread. They are spread. He says, لازم تعرفون هذه المشكلة. It is binding and necessary that you know this problem. It is spread, whether we are speaking about just strong atheism, which is outright denial, or whether it is just the issue of doubt, which is like weak atheism. He says you will see a new generation of the shabab. The previous generations never knew this. We never knew this type of atheism or this doubt. But the new generation, it is spreading and it is increasing and it requires positive action. He says that we must increase in presenting the various evidences of Tawheed, of Rububiyyah, meaning that you learn and you teach and you understand the evidences of Tawheed in his Rububiyyah with respect to his existence, and to explain them to the people in a way that they understand, for them to know them, and likewise to emphasize them and to repeat them until even in the mosques of Allah. And obviously he says, look, in the mosque you're going to find believers. We are all believers here. No one here really doubts. They're all believers. But because of this problem, the evidences for Allah's rububiyyah must be taught and they must be repeated. So he continues emphasizing this point, and he says that these affairs are from the most extreme of importance. He's basically saying that even though we are already believers, even though we already believe, you have to understand that Muslims are often raised not differently from the way, for example, a Jew or a Christian or a Buddhist is raised. Right? He follows tradition, he follows his parents. And we're going to cover this topic a bit later, inshallah ta'ala. And so there's a danger when the people are raised without really truly understanding falsehood in detail and the evidences against that falsehood in detail. When the people are raised, just for example, believing in Islam and so on and so forth, without being taught what the Shaykh is saying here, the specific evidences of Tawheed, of Rububiyyah, of Allah's existence and so forth, then those people will be prone to having shak at some point later on if they are not prepared to deal with the kind of doubts that will come to them. So, this is what you tend to see happen in a lot of Muslim nations, that children are told to go to the masjid, they are told to memorize the Quran, right? So they learn the Arabic alphabet and they will memorize the Quran. They can read off the Quran, but they can't obviously speak or understand Arabic, but they can memorize the Quran. And beyond that, they are given only very superficial knowledge, right, at a very superficial level. What are the 6 pillars of Iman? Belief in Allah, the angels, the books, the messengers, at a very superficial level. And people are just generally brought up in this manner. And that understanding of the Quran, and understanding of the stories of the prophets, and understanding of the arguments that took place between the prophets and those to whom they were sent, and the nature of the evidences, and rooting those evidences into the hearts and minds of the children, we know that that is largely absent from many Muslim nations. And this is one of the factors which has led today, when with the presence of the internet and whatever else, when the doubts come and they fall like an avalanche, the doubts and misconceptions like an avalanche, and they fall upon the hearts and minds are unable to repel these doubts. And so many of those people who are weak, they become misguided. So that was what the Shaykh was indicating, and I wanted to begin with those 2 statements from those 2 scholars to introduce the topic itself. So obviously that's taken quite a bit of time. So starting then, we should establish the first point, which is that the evidences which establish the rububiyyah, which means that there is a Lord, a creator, an owner, a regulator, a controller. The evidences which establish the rububiyyah of Allah are already present, right? They're already established, and they fall into 4 categories. First of all, by way of the fitrah. The fitrah is something that we have inside of us, as the scholars explain, like Ibn al-Qayyim, Ibn Taymiyyah. The fitrah is something just like you are born with the ability to speak, even though you cannot speak when you are born, but you are born with the ability to speak, right? And you are born with the ability to walk, even though you cannot walk when you are born. Likewise, there is something called the fitrah, which you are born with, which gives you the ability to accept sound beliefs and beneficial actions, right? The fitrah is drawn towards these things. If the fitrah is left by itself, you will be drawn towards sound beliefs and beneficial actions. If there's nothing that comes in the way, any impediments or anything else. And in a similar manner, if you are born free of any defects, you will eventually go on to walk, and you will go on to speak, unless there are some impediments that come in the way. In a similar manner, the fitrah is likewise. The fitrah is your capacity and ability to know and to believe in sound beliefs and to accept sound actions. And so within this fitrah, there are certain universals, there are certain universal things which for example, the one thing cannot be in 2 places at the same time. A child playing with the toys knows this, right? A child, when it sees the toy and it's over there, it's not going to look over there and over there to look for the same thing, because it knows that something can only be in one place, can't be in 2 places at the same time. So there are certain universals, right? Likewise, from those universals is that you expect retaliation for injustice. A child automatically knows this, right? And Ibn Taymiyyah gives an evidence, says when a child, for example, falls or hurts itself, by a chair, for example, or something, and when the parent comes and it slaps or hits the object, then the child stops crying, right? Because there's something there which is like an inherent sense of justice that the child is able to understand emotionally, right? So these things are present within the child, the anticipation of justice. So the point being that there are certain things present in the fitrah, and one of those things is the existence of a creator. This does not require any thinking, any observation, any intellect. It's inbuilt and embedded, right? And a child will grow up wanting to be grateful to this creator, so long as it is not taken away from that fitrah by any kind of brainwashing, indoctrination, or something like, taught idol worship or taught whatever else, right? The child will naturally go on to hold sound beliefs in that regard. So by way of fitrah, by way of hiss. Secondly, number two, hiss. Hiss is basically just sensory perception and just experience, just physical experience. This is without even using reason. We're not talking about reason here. This is just hiss, meaning sensory perception, like what you see, what you feel. You eat something, and you know that when you eat, your body is designed in such a way that it will take the benefit out of that food that you eat and excrete what is not useful, right? Just everyday, day-to-day experience that you have, right? This is a hiss, and what you see, mushahad, what you see and observe, just by that alone, without even requiring reason, aql. That's the second type. The third type is aql itself, reason, rational evidences. There are many rational evidences. And fourthly, there is naql, which is sound revelation. So the point being that the evidence for the existence of a creator is already established by way of these roots. And just by mere reflection upon what we see of creation, of life and death, the cycles of life and death in everything that we see around us, humans being born, humans dying, plants, arising, then dying, and what we see of Allah Azza wa Jal raising some people, humiliating others, guiding some, misguiding others, saving some, destroying others, giving to some people, withholding to other people. Everything that we see and observe, all of that is an indication of the actions of Allah Azza wa Jal. This indicates the actions of Allah Azza wa Jal. And the actions of Allah Azza wa Jal in turn give evidence to His attributes. And His attributes in turn give evidence to His essence. Right? So, this is very, very simple reasoning. It is as simple as saying, as we've said many times, just the mere existence of this bottle, just the fact that this bottle exists, is in itself direct empirical evidence that the maker of this bottle exists. It's as simple as that. And the mere fact that this creation exists with all of its particular details is itself, in and of itself, a direct evidence of its creator and maker. It's as simple as that. The reasoning is very, very, very simple. However, when we are indoctrinated and brainwashed with speculations and conjectures and doubts and misconceptions, it becomes very, very difficult to see the simplicity of this reasoning. Right? When I say to you that the mere existence of this bottle is in itself a direct evidence of the maker of the bottle, this is very simple and straightforward. No one is going to deny this. And the one who denies this, you would see him to be mad. The same thing applies to the creation, except that many layers of doubts and confusion have been put in the middle so that you can't see the simplicity of the evidence. Similar to how we can see it with this example here. Right? And that's how they've constructed all of these shubuhat and doubts and so on and so forth. So this is why in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal, He said about the messengers, قَالَتْ رُسُلُهُمْ أَفِي اللَّهِ الشَّكْ فَاطِرِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. So He said, the messengers said to the people to whom they were sent, is there any doubt regarding Allah? Is there any doubt about His existence? The originator of the heavens and the earth. Right? So this thing is not in doubt. This is not something. Doubt is only about those things for which there is, something which is hidden and not apparent. Doubt can only be applied to those things. But as for that which is open, apparent, evident, and something which you experience yourself with your senses, there's no doubt about that whatsoever. This is why the evidence for Allah's existence is apparent everywhere, all around, in the phenomena, in the signs that we see, the sun, the moon, the motion, the calculation, the timing, right? In everything that we see, all of that is clear, direct, empirical evidence, just as the bottle as an artifact is evidence of the one who made it. Right? This reasoning is very, very simple. For that reason, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, used to say, or he used to cite this poetry, وَلَيْسَ يَصِحُ فِي الْأَذْهَانِ شَيْءٍ وَلَيْسَ يَصِحُ فِي الْأَذْهَانِ شَيْءٍ إِذَا احْتَاجَ النَّهَارِ إِلَى دَلِيلٍ. He says that the mind itself cannot be sound. There can be nothing sound in a person's mind if he wants evidence for the day. If you want evidence that it's daytime, if a person wants, if you want to be proved to me it's daytime, and it's daytime, right? There can't be anything sound in the mind of that person who requires dalil, who wants evidence for something which is so apparent and evident to begin with. And likewise, in the poetry, وَفِي كُلِّ شَيْءٍ لَهُ آيَةٌ تَدُلُّ عَلَىٰ أَنَّهُ وَاحِدٌ. In every single thing, there is a sign which indicates or proves that He, meaning Allah, is one. That He, meaning Allah, is one. So everything that we see around us of the phenomena, and likewise in our own selves, then all of that is clear evidence of the existence of Allah. And that's why Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, وَتَأَمَّلْ حَالَ الْعَالَمِ, reflect upon the condition of the alam, kullihi, all of the world, both the higher part of it and the lower part of it, in all of its parts. Meaning, you look at the sky, you look at what's upon the earth, you look at all the individual aspects of it as well. So, for example, the sun by itself, the moon by itself, the phenomenon of rain by itself, and all the individual elements, and you will find all of it bearing witness to the affirmation of its maker, originator, and owner. And he says to reject its maker, it's similar to actually denying intellect itself and denying the fitrah. So meaning that if you deny a creator for everything that you see, it's the same as denying your intellect and your fitrah. You might as well deny that you have a capacity known as aql, as intellect, right? You might as well deny that altogether. So to deny a creator is similar to denying reason. And there's no difference between the two of them whatsoever. So the first thing that we want to start off with that you must understand, so what I want you to understand is there's a certain way of understanding where the atheists are coming from and how they have constructed their system in a way to deceive you and to trick you into believing that what they have are certainties and what you have are fairy tales, when in fact it's the other way around. What you have are absolute certainties, and what they have are fairy tales, conjectures, and which oppose reason, right? And so they've constructed a system by which to turn that into this and this into that. So the first point that we must understand is that the evidence for the existence of Allah is already established. Right? It's al-hujjatu qa'imah. The proof is already established. And there are many angles to this. So we want to be clear with that. We can spend a bit of time looking at just a quick illustration, inshallah ta'ala. Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, the word alam, this word alam, alameen, with a fath, with a vowel, is similar to khatam, like a ring which is sealed, like sealed. He says an alam is something by which something else is known. Just like a khatam is something by which something is sealed, right? So an alam is a thing by which something else is known, right? This is the meaning of the word alam. So when we say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all of the Alameen, this is referring to every type of creation. Every type of creation is an alam, right? And through that, through each individual alam, we come to know the Creator. So for example, humans are an alam. We are an alam, right? Humans point to Allah Azza wa Jal. The jinn are an alam. They are a world in themselves. The spiders are an alam. Elephants are an alam. The snakes are an alam. All of these, every species, every category is an alam. Every living creature is an alam. Every type or category. And so that alam, something is called an alam because it points to something else. It is a signpost to something else. So therefore, all of the alameen, they are evidence for the Lord of the alameen. Just the mere existence of the alameen is a proof for the Lord of the alameen. And that's why we see in the Quran, وَهُوَ رَبُّ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. He is the Lord of every single thing. In Surah Al-An'am, verse 164. Likewise, ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. Such is your Lord, such is Allah, the Lord of your Lord. There is none worthy of worship except He, the creator of every single thing. So every single thing is an evidence for the existence of Allah, because it is an effect from the athar, from the effects of His power. Right? Just like we say that this bottle is from the athar, from the effects of the power and the knowledge and the will and the wisdom of the person who brought or the people or the company who brought this bottle, who made it to be. So everything that we see is an athar, is an effect of the athar of the maker and the owner of that thing. Right? So the sun and the moon and the precise timings by which they operate year in, year out, exactly, they do not deviate by seconds, from their appointed courses. And likewise, everything else that we see and observe, all of that is a clear evidence of that it is an athar, which then traces back to the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal. So now Ibn Taymiyyah, he then elaborates a bit more upon this proof. He says that when we just look in the creation and we see, for example, how there are no plants, and then all of a sudden there are plants, right? So for example, if you look at Saudi Arabia now, right, the greenery is coming back, right? The mountains are just hard rock. You can't see any greenery anywhere. All of a sudden, for hundreds of miles now, you are seeing just greenery propping up out in the desert, where there's, So when we look, we see things coming to be and things disappearing. Things coming to life and things dying. Whether plants, animals, he says the emergence of animals, plants, minerals, rain and clouds and the likes. We see them every day from non-existence coming into existence. And we know that therefore these things are clearly originated. They are muhdath, something which came to be after not being. Right? He says this is something which is elementary knowledge. It's the most basic elementary knowledge. So once we establish that these things are muhdath, they have come to be, they are originated, then by necessity they need a muhdith, one who originated them, right? Similar to, I know that this bottle did not exist, this specific bottle did not exist 5 years ago, right? It came to be after not being. And I know by necessity, therefore, if it is muhdath, therefore it must have a muhdith, one who originated it, right? This reasoning is flawless. You cannot argue against this reasoning. It is sound reasoning, right? So he says, Ibn Taymiyyah says that, we see all these things happening around us, life, death, recycle, and this is something that Allah mentions in the Quran all the time to us about the clouds and the rain, reviving the earth which is dead, right? Human reproduction, how you did not exist and then you came to exist. All these events that we see, we constantly see life, death, rebirth, existence, non-existence, coming to be in cycles all the time around us. He says this is clear evidence that all these things are muhdath, right? They are originated, they came to be after not being. And by necessity they require a muhdith. Now, there are only 4 possible answers to explain what we see. There are only 4 possible answers to explain what we see, right? Everything that we see around us, all of these phenomena. The first possible explanation is pure nothingness. Pure nothingness. So if you ask the question, if you address your child, you ask anybody, what is it that makes the clouds appear then disappear? What is it that makes the plants to grow and die and then to reappear? What is it that causes a person to be born and die through causes and whatever? What is it that's behind all of these things these phenomena that we see all the time? What's behind all of this? Then the first answer is pure nothingness. This is the first answer. The second answer is to say it is what they call nature, tabi'ah. It is tabi'ah, it is nature. The third thing is to say it is some other creation, like, for example, aliens, right? Some aliens or something like this, some other intelligence. Or fourthly, it is a non-created eternal being. A non-created and uncreated eternal being. There are only four options to explain what we see. Pure nothingness, nothing. Tabi'ah, which is just what they call nature. Or it is some other life form, like aliens. Or it is an eternal, uncreated being. So now let's address each of these four situations. As for the first, pure nothingness, then we know this is impossible. This is impossible because reason tells us this is impossible. What is nothing cannot bring anything else into existence. Nothing cannot create anything. Nothing cannot generate anything. And because, Ibn Taymiyyah says here, he says the occurrence of newly arisen entities or events, meaning things that happen, that we see happening, all the events that we see happening in the world, right? Natural events or things like this. He says, for these to happen without an originator, for them to happen without an originator is known to be futile by reason. Our aql knows this is false. Our aql knows this is false. And he says this is so firmly entrenched in the offspring of Adam, right? To such a degree that even children, if a child was struck, meaning if someone hit a child, and then he said, "Who hit me?" and you said, "No one struck you," right? The child's reason wouldn't accept, even a little child wouldn't accept that argument that nothing struck him, right? Even a child would reject that. So that's why, because a child knows that a strike cannot take place without a fa'il, without a darib, right? Can't take place, simply impossible. And so, likewise, if someone said that it was acceptable for a piece of writing or a construction or a plant and their likes to appear without an originator, then to intelligent people he would either be insane, or he is a sophist. A sophist is one who uses futile, false, deceptive, flowery arguments. Right? So the only two possibilities. Either you are mad, you are insane, or you are a sophist. A sophist is deliberately using false arguments to hide and confuse the truth. Right? And this is what the people today, the atheists, they are sophists in the way that they argue. So he says, they are like the person who rejects the most elementary, the most basic of sciences and the most necessary types of knowledge. Right? So the first, that nothing is behind everything that we see, right? The causes of the sun and the moon and everything behind biological life, right? The complexity of it. To say nothing is behind it, then this is the saying of insane or mad people or sophists, right? Who use deliberately false argumentation. So we can dismiss that one from the very beginning. The second reason that you can bring, second explanation, is basically to say, well, it's nature. It's nature that is behind everything. And so when we speak about nature, we are speaking about, all the particles, forces, the causes, effects. But you have to think carefully here that this is not the right answer to the question. So when they say it's nature, they're answering a different question. Let me explain to you with an example. If I said to you, if there's a cash machine and a cash machine is giving out cash, if you are able to explain to me exactly how that cash machine is working, this isn't an explanation of how. This is answering the question of how. It's not answering the question of who, what, or why. Do you understand, right? There's who, what, and why, and there's how. So when you explain to me how a cash machine works, or a 3D printer how it works, or how photosynthesis in a plant works, or how the liver works, or how the brain works, you are answering the question of how. You're not answering the question of who, what, and why. Do you understand the difference? Right? So when they say it's nature, that doesn't answer the question. Right? It's like saying, I've explained how the engine of a car works, and so therefore I've now explained how the car came to be. You haven't. You've just explained the causes and the effects and the mechanisms and how they're all tied together to function in the way that they function. Right? You've explained the how. You've answered the question of how. You haven't answered the question of who, what, and why. Right? Which is what this is what we're answering here. Right? Who, what, and why. Whatever. So the point being that how nature works is not an answer to our question. And that's why Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, he answers, he says, a thing cannot bring itself into existence. Because either something occurs which brings it into existence, or it will remain non-existent. Right? So in other words, this bottle can't bring itself into existence. A leaf can't bring itself into existence. A rock can't bring itself into existence. A cloud can't bring itself into existence. Everything which is in nature, it can't bring itself into existence. Right? It needs something outside of it to bring it into existence. And he says that if something therefore comes to exist, then it came to exist on account of something else outside of it. Otherwise, if something can exist by itself, then it would be obligatory. This thing would be eternal. It would always be there. But it's not. Right? So this means that when they say nature is the answer, this is really a type of deception. Because they're not answering the question of who and what and why brought it about. They are simply answering the question of how does nature function? How do clouds appear? Well, it's because of such and such. How does photosynthesis take place in a leaf? Because of such and such. Right? How does that work? Because such and such. They're answering the question of how. And that's not an answer to the question. So nature cannot explain the origination. Right? You're just simply speaking about ways and means and whatever else. And also there are some refutations of all of this anyway. 4 points against the argument by nature. First point is that matter is always inorganic, meaning it doesn't have life. And matter always is dead. You can't get life from non-life. This is a rule. Right? Life can never come from non-life. Life always comes from life. Right? If you look at all of biological life, it always comes from biological life. It cannot come from non-life. Right? So if there's only matter, life cannot come from dead matter. Right? Unconscious matter. Number 2, matter itself is not rational. It can't think. It doesn't have any self-awareness. It can't develop information. It can't develop the idea of information. It doesn't have a will. It doesn't have a direction. It doesn't have a choice. There's no such concept in matter. Number 3, so matter is not rational. Number 3, matter doesn't have a will. It can't pursue goals and objectives. Matter can't decide, right, I'm going to turn into a molecule which has embedded information. Matter doesn't choose or have goals which it pursues. It can't pursue, it can't have a will, it can't pursue goals, and it can't have objectives. Number 4, random interactions of matter cannot produce, an organized, intelligible universe which we can investigate and make sense of. Right? Just random interactions do not have the power to do that. Let's just stay on this point a bit more, because there's another principle. So I mentioned to you one principle. Life can only come from life. Life never comes from non-life. This is a rule. No one can contest this rule. It's not deniable. It's a rule. Life only ever comes from life. Another rule is, right, so to explain this rule, let me explain to you first of all that before anything comes to be, take this bottle again as an example. What gave rise to this bottle is knowledge, will, wisdom, and power. Right? There has to be these attributes before anything comes to be. This means that when anything physical is going to be made into a creation, then it has to be preceded by thoughts and ideas, right? Which represent knowledge, will, wisdom, and power, right? So which way does the arrow go? The arrow goes from thoughts and ideas to physical. Yes? Is that right? Are you with me? Are you following? Right? Which way does the arrow go? The arrow goes, there has to be knowledge, and that will flow in the direction of physical objects. Very, very simple. A washing machine. What did that start off as? Some idea in someone's mind, right? Along with knowledge, will, wisdom. Wisdom meaning for a reason, for a purpose. Knowledge, the knowledge. Will, the choice to do so. And power, the ability to do so, right? So these four attributes. The arrow only goes in this way. It does not go in that way. It doesn't go from matter and then go to abstract ideas. Things which are thoughts in the mind. Do you understand? Right? So the flow is always from this direction to that direction. There is never, ever, ever any single evidence, nor can there be, that the flow of direction is in the opposite way. Right? So meaning, what we mean by this is, and again we're sticking on this answer of nature being the answer, right? You can't just suddenly have matter and then all of a sudden you have an alphabet. Or you just can't have an alphabet from just matter. Do you understand? You can only have an alphabet if there's now a third party in existence to whom that alphabet makes sense. Do you understand? Right? So like if I had let's say 26 letters of the English alphabet, and I just threw them randomly, right? Imagine these are particles now. These are particles. And let's just say randomly, so imagine there's no one in existence. No existence. But let's just say there's millions of these particles, each one is a letter of the alphabet. And all of a sudden, due to random interactions, all of a sudden there's a sentence produced which says something like, fresh green juice is delicious or something, right? Just randomly it produces whatever. That is not information because it's just random, because nobody exists to make sense of that information. So matter cannot produce information. It can only be information to one to whom that is information, if you understand, right? So now, like if we developed a code, someone developed the binary code, ones and zeros, yeah, you know that, yeah. The binary code is 1 and a 0. And by using certain number of bits, you can represent letters of the alphabet, right? 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, whatever. And you can generate. That only makes sense because there's already some people with thought, intelligence who've devised that language, that alphabet. Yes? Makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah? So what I'm saying, but what I'm illustrating to you is that the arrow does not flow in the reverse direction. You cannot have just matter, and then all of a sudden you've got a language, you've got information, right? And this is the biggest problem that they have today in trying to solve this problem, right? In genetics, biology, evolution, whatever, is now they've realized, because remember the stages in their disbelief. The stages in their disbelief. The first is just the arrogant disbelief, yes, life is just so simple. Cells are just blobs, and it's possible for life just to come together and whatever, yeah? And as they continue to study and realize that, hang on, wait a minute, it's not as simple as that anymore, it's a bit more complicated now. And now we're realizing these cells kind of operating a bit like, computers and information systems or whatever, and sequences, right? So then they realize there's a DNA sequence in the cells. And then they believe, well, this looks like to be a kind of code for proteins and whatever. Then as they go further, they realize, hold on, actually, it's like a database which has many layers which can be read forwards and backwards. So the DNA can be read forwards and backwards. So like, imagine someone wrote a book which can be read forwards and backwards at the same time. And it's meaningful. Right? So now they realize, hold on a minute, now This is information. Now, where did information come from? Because like, just like if I say to you, right, you can see sentences on this paper. Can I explain that by way of the ink in the paper? See this text. This has a message, right? Has a meaning. Can I explain that away just by the ink in the paper? I can't, can I? Because the information is not the medium, right? The paper and the ink can't explain the information. The information comes from somewhere else. Do you understand, right? So they have this big problem now in biology and evolution, which they're trying to explain where does information come from. And obviously, to us, it's very clear. It's apparent. أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ. Ilm and khalq is binding. Ilm and khalq. The one creation it implies knowledge, right? And from the names of Allah, Al-Khallaqul Alim. At the end of Surah Yasin, He is the great creator, the all-knowing creator. Knowledge and creation are binding, right? So what we are saying here is random interactions of matter and nature do not lead to alphabets. The DNA itself, the way DNA works, is there's multiple levels. So, like you've got on this piece of paper, you've got a letter, one letter, then you've got a word, then you've got a sentence, then you've got a paragraph. In the DNA, there's exactly the same thing, right? So an individual letter is a nucleotide. It's like one base nucleotide, right? Then you have, it's a character, which is a nucleotide. Then you have a letter which is a codon, which consists of 3 nucleotides in the DNA. Then you have a word, which is basically a gene. A gene is a word. Then you've got a sentence, which is called an operon. And then you've got a whole paragraph, which is called, they call it a regulon. Anyway, so, I mean, do you need any more evidence or any more proof than this? Like what they are seeing here is no different to what the people of the past would see of the miracles shown to them by the prophets, right? When these people are seeing and studying these things, and in front of their eyes, in front of their faces, they are seeing these things. This is like the miracles that the people of the past would see. The hujjah is already established. We're not debating about any hujjah. The hujjah is already established. We're just looking at your sophistry and the way you've constructed a system by which to deceive mankind. And how do we tear that apart and how do we make sense of it? That's what the issue is. This is not even an issue, because the existence of Allah is so apparent and manifest that you have to be insane or a sophist to deny it, right? So anyway, the point being here, we are refuting the second possible argument, which is nature, right? So for all these reasons, it can't be nature. Nature doesn't have intelligence, doesn't have a will, doesn't have a goal, doesn't have a direction. It can't produce anything which is organized, intelligible, right? And the principle always is from thought and ideas to physicality. We see all around us the construction of airplanes, of washing machines, of things like that. It always comes from knowledge and it leads in that direction towards physicality, to a physical thing. It's never the other way around. Never the other way around. It's impossible the other way around, right? You can't, just random matter cannot produce languages, words, letters, and the whole system of programming and coding, and it doesn't work that way. It's impossible. And for them to claim that, they have to prove it in a lab. Prove to me in a lab that the direction is in that way, right? From matter, and it leads to abstract ideas and then coding, languages, whatever. Prove to me in a lab, random example, and show to me that you can do it. You'll never do it. This is a scientific method, right? You can't do it. You need to prove that for the rest of the whole of your view about everything, for that to be scientifically valid. And you can't do it. Flow is always from knowledge, will, wisdom, and power in that direction to physicality. It's not the other way around, right? It never works that way. So for these reasons, number 2 is out. Nature is out. Yes, is that clear? Number 3, the only other way that you can come back to explain is basically like what Richard Dawkins said when really pushed in a corner. He said, well, possibly it could be maybe there's some aliens who came. It's a possibility that it could be some aliens from somewhere else and they came and they seeded life. So really all you're doing here is you're pushing the problem one further back. It's like dominoes. There's one domino at the end, you say, okay, let me just put another one behind it. And then you bring another one behind it and you keep going. You're not solving the problem, right? So to say that it's aliens, right? So meaning that you've had to admit that there has to be some sort of intelligence, there has to be knowledge, will, wisdom, power. You've come to that point, but then your arrogance is dismissing the other possibility and saying, oh, it could be some aliens who themselves appeared by way of evolution. So what you're doing is you're now pushing the problem further one more step. You haven't really answered the question. You're evading the question, right? So this third answer really is what we call a chain of endless causes. A chain of endless causes. Because then you have to go back and say, well, those aliens themselves must have come from some other aliens. And those aliens must have come from some other aliens. Then you have to keep going, eventually in a big cycle in eternity, and you're never going to stop. This is what we call, this is called tasalsul al-ilal wal-mu'thirat wal-fa'iliyah. What it simply means is that you're just building an endless eternal chain of causes. Right? This was caused by that was caused by that. You go back in eternity. Or, endless chain of creators. So this clearly cannot be correct. This is not an answer to the question. This only leaves the fourth possibility, which is an uncreated eternal being that is unoriginated and which differs from his creation in essence and attributes. And this is Allah Azza wa Jal. And this brings us nicely to the ayah in the Quran, which embodies this form of argumentation. أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ. Were they created by nothing? That's the first of the four answers. أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ. Or are they themselves the creators? أَمْ خَلَقُوا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ بَلْ لَا يُوقِنُونَ. Or did they create the heavens and the earth? But no, they have no certainty. Right? So this is just a simple demonstration of the fact that Allah's existence is already clear, it is established, it is evident, and no one really in history denied the existence of Allah Azza wa Jal except for a number of people, of the great tyrants. So what we'll do inshallah ta'ala is we'll stop at this point and we'll pray Isha, and if you're happy to continue, we'll continue with the topic afterwards inshallah. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi wa ba'd. So we finished the first session by just giving an illustration of an argument for the existence of Allah Azza wa Jal, and that is by first of all establishing that everything that we see around us is muhdath, is originated, and that we can clearly see by the fact that there is life followed by death, followed by life, followed by death, and events take place, hawadith, events take place, and they came to be after not being. So we've established everything is muhdath, it is originated, because if it wasn't, it would be eternal, and it's not eternal. It's clearly it's not eternal. So whatever is originated must have an originator, and there can only be four possible explanations. There can only be four things which originate something. The first is pure nothingness, and we established that cannot be true, pure nothingness. Second is nature itself, and this is obviously the only escape that atheists and naturalists have. They can only work on nature and the laws within nature and random interactions. The only thing that they have to basically go upon. And all of the theories, explanations, models and so on and so forth have to be built upon these foundations. Right? The law-like behavior within nature and random interactions. So we gave some arguments and reasons as to why that cannot be correct and cannot be true. And this then leads us to the third possible explanation, which is just to simply say there's an endless chain of causes right? So one way you would present that would be to say, well, some aliens came and they seeded life on this earth. And then you'd have to go back to who created them, and you go back, in an endless chain. So an endless chain is not possible either. And that only leaves the fourth possibility, which is an uncreated eternal being. Now these people, what they do is, from the very beginning, they dismiss that as even a possibility, which shows obviously their arrogance and their conceit. And then the only thing they've got left with is the three options that we said. And that's why when you look at what these people are saying today now, and you look at their theories, you'll see one of them, Lawrence Krauss, he writes a book saying that the universe can come out of nothing. The universe can come out of nothing. And then they start bringing all these, justifications, of negative and positive, and they both cancel out, which means nothing. This is ridiculous nonsense anyway. Conjectures, right? So they're actually using the argument of nothingness. They're present today, these people are using this argument. Then obviously the second one, which is nature. There are people present today using the argument of nature, which is obviously the Big Bang and evolution and things like that. And then you have those people who, when pushed in a corner, they will resort to the argument of like aliens. Why? Because they've had to concede that there is, obviously there's knowledge and information and there's something in DNA, for example, that simply cannot be just blind chance, right? So when pushed in that corner, they have to say, well, possibly it could be, we could posit that there were some aliens, advanced aliens that came and whatever else. So they'll go in that direction, but only when they're pushed. But otherwise, it's number two that is where they are on, which is the argument of nature itself. So we said that none of that really holds when we analyze it in detail, and that's why in the whole of history there has never ever been any atheists, or except among a very small number of mankind. This is something that's very, very recent and very new. Very recent and very new. And so for that reason, we're going to look in our second part of this session, inshallah ta'ala, look at some of the greatest tyrants that walked upon this earth. From them is Nimrood and Fir'aun, and just look at them. And even they weren't atheists out of conviction. They knew inwardly that they are marboob and makhluq. Right? They knew that they are created and originated, but it was something else. It was conceit and arrogance that really led them to their disbelief. So we'll look at these two, and likewise another group called the Dhahiriyyah, which are mentioned in the Quran. So those which are mentioned in the Quran, which essentially either spoke the word of atheism, or who basically assumed for themselves the qualities of rububiyyah, right? That they have control over life and death and things like that, right? So there's three categories or three instances. So the first of them is Nimrood, and he was in the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah Azza wa Jal, he mentions a dispute or an argument that took place. So he says, this is just a verse or two after Ayatul Kursi, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِي حَاجَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ فِي رَبِّهِ أَنْ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكِ. Have you not seen or considered the one who argued with Ibrahim about his Lord, just because he had been given some authority? Right, so this was the man to whom Allah had given him power and authority upon the earth. And so he wrongly thought, by way of this power and authority, that as if he does not have a Lord, as if he doesn't have one to whom he will answer. So he became arrogant, and so he began to basically claim some of the attributes of rububiyyah, like giving life and taking life. So in this argument, Allah Azza wa Jal says, have you not seen the one who disputed with Ibrahim regarding his Lord, just because Allah had given him some dominion? So Ibrahim said to him, my Lord is the one who gives life and who takes life. Is one who gives life, causes life, and who causes death. So he said, that this Nimrood replied, قَالَ أَنَا أُحْيِي وَأُمِيتُ. He said, I give life and I take life. And what he meant by this was that I can take a man, I can put him to prison, and I can starve him, and I can cause him to die. And likewise, I can bring, for example, a pregnant woman or two pregnant women. I can kill one of them with a child, and I can allow the other one to live. Right? So I can bring about life. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he said to him, قال إبراهيم فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأت بها من المغرب. So he said, for indeed Allah, He's the one who brings the sun from the east, so bring it from the west. فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرْ وَاللَّهُ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. So the one who disbelieved was confounded, and Allah does not guide an oppressive, a transgressing people. Now, if we reflect upon this situation here, what we see here is this Nimrood. All he's done is that he's simply been able to control some of the causes and defects which Allah has put in the creation. So because he's been able to control them, he's now assumed somehow that he has some of the qualities of rububiyyah, right? So for example, starving is a cause of death. Clearly, starving, Allah has made starvation as a cause of death. People die because of starvation. Right? Allah has created His creation in that way that if you do not have food or drink for a few days, food for longer days, weeks for example, you will die. Because your body is created to function on nourishment, nutrition, and so on and so forth, and water and whatever else. Right? And likewise, from the causes of death, or if you are killed, or if some trauma or something is brought to your body, you will die. So all he's done is he's managed to control these ways and means which have actually been placed and put in place by Allah Azza wa Jal. And because of that control, he's now assumed somehow that he doesn't have a Lord. And he's assumed some of the qualities of rububiyyah. And this is similar to what these people are doing today from the atheists and the materialists. All they're doing is they are studying the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal, and they are manipulating aspects of it, and they think that they are the masters. Right? Like, I'll give you one example. Just the other day I was watching this seminar, this scientific... basically this guy was speaking about how sound and vision, we have been able to digitize sound and vision. Right? So we can put sounds into recording, and we can put what we see into images, right? So you have images and audio files basically, right? But what about smell? Can we digitize smell? So this guy basically speaking first of all just about vision, how vision, we have all the colors that an eye is able to perceive, millions and millions of colors, they can be reduced simply to 3 colors, red, green and blue, right? If you mix red, green and blue and the various shades of them, you get millions and millions of colors. So you have red, green and blue, then you have 1 to 256 shades of red, green and blue. And when you combine different combinations, you can come up with like 16 million colors or something, right? And the eye can actually perceive whatever it's... So he said, what about smell? So with smell, it's actually more complicated, right? You can smell trillions of smells, not just millions as in the case of the color with the eye. That's because with the eye, like red, green and blue, there are just 3 parameters. But with the smell, there's actually 400 different parameters, right? So when you smell things, it's like the dog has got an extremely sensitive nose, right? So the smelling capacity is absolutely phenomenal, like trillions of different types of smells it can detect and distinguish between them as well. So this guy, this is a technology. It's a future technology conference. So basically, what he's doing is he's trying to digitize smell in the same way that you digitize sound and vision. But there's actually a difference between the two. With sound and vision, you do not need the actual material. You don't need the ear, and you don't need the eye, right, to be involved in that process. But with smell, you have to have the actual, whatever it is in the nose, whatever's doing the detecting the smells. So what they've done is they've taken actual tissues, I don't know where from, maybe a dog or something else, and they've created basically a device which is plugged into technology, into this living tissue. And so for it to work, they have to keep the tissue alive, which means they have to feed it. So what they've done basically is they've merged biological life directly with technology and computing power, and through it they can now characterize smells, just like you can distinguish between red, blue, green and all the various shades, or you can distinguish between like sounds, right? So then he's speaking about the actual applications of this technology. So this technology could be, for example, and they've actually created the actual device, right? It's like an octopus-shaped thing with holes where the particles come through, and it smells, and then it's got a living tissue underneath, right? So it would mean, for example, let's say you're in an airport, these devices would be along the corridor. So if someone was coming along with, let's say, some explosives, that would be able to detect it straight away. And it could distinguish that smell of that explosive from a million trillion other types of smells, because everything has a very specific type of smell, right? You could even detect, like, you as a person, like your sweat or whatever else, right? So it's very, very extremely sensitive. So the point that I'm making here is that look at how they're exploiting what already exists of the ways and means, the causes and the effects within Allah's creation, and so exploiting that for whatever, for facilitating it for beneficial interests, for business, for whatever else it is, and then thinking as if they are the masters and they are the ones who are the gene, that this is something that they must be lauded, And then when you listen to these people speaking, every now and then you'll hear some absolutely, you think, is this man insane or what? He'll say, yes, well, it looks like evolution produced this tremendous, they'll throw in like a little sentence here and there, right? And ascribing it to evolution. So the point that we're making here with Nimrood is that he simply took and manipulated causes and effects which we can know either by direct experience, like in the case of starving someone, we know from experience, starvation will lead to your death, or by investigation and study, by scientific investigation. We can come and we can discover causes and effects and systems, and we can manipulate them. So just the ability to do that, this Nimrood thought that somehow he became arrogant, and he doesn't realize that he does not have independent control. And he cannot independently create life of his own accord, right? He cannot independently generate life, right? But he's just simply playing with the ways and means. This is like a type of deception. And so this is the same trick that you see these people are playing about, with biological life and information and genetic engineering and so on and so forth and whatever else, thinking as if they are the creators when they are not, right? They are just playing with the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. So anyway, the point being here is that Nimrood is an example of a man who was an arrogant tyrant, and inwardly deep he knew that he is marboob and makhluq, right? He's just pure plain arrogance on his behalf. So the point that we are making is that there was never really any atheist in history really who deep down really truly believed, right, that nature generates life of its own accord or things like that. These people weren't really there. Likewise, second example of the Pharaoh, the Fir'aun. And Fir'aun, another arrogant tyrant, he said to Musa alayhi salam, وَمَا رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. What is this Lord of the worlds that you are talking about? This is arrogant denial. And likewise he said in another ayah, Fir'aun, he said to Musa and Harun, قَالَ فَمَنْ رَبُّكُمَا يَا مُوسَى. He said, so who is your Lord? Who is your Lord, O Musa? And the reply of Musa alayhi salam, he said, رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى. He said, our Lord is the one who gave everything its creation and then he guided it. Now this argument here, remember, this is the greatest tyrant, what appears to be the greatest atheist on the face of the earth in that time. The greatest tyrant. And from the greatest of the messengers was Musa alayhi salam, and he gave him from the greatest of the arguments for Allah's rububiyyah. We need to truly understand this argument here, which is that Allah gave everything its creation, then he guided it. What does this mean? When we return back to the Mufassirun, we see that they explain that from the Tabi'een and other than them, that Allah Azza wa Jal, he gave everything its particular form of creation, meaning its physical appearance and form and structure. And then he gave it its guidance. What does it mean, its guidance? It means that he then inspired it as to its habitat, where it's going to live, and the nature of its food, and the nature of its behavior, and its spouse, right? So everything to do with that particular organism, Allah guided it and inspired it to behave and function in the way that it actually functions, right? So when this is a tremendous argument for Allah's rububiyyah, and so we're going to stick with this for a short while, just to elaborate upon it, so we understand how, in a modern context, how we can clearly see how this is a powerful argument. So, if we take, for example, this discipline or this what we have now the growing field of robotics, right? If you do a search, you can just search it and find a video. It's called MIT robot backflip. MIT robot backflip. You'll come with a video of this. This is Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where they're developing robotics, and they have this dog-like creature. It's 4 legs and a body in the middle. There's no head or anything, and I think it's called the Spot Mini. And you look at it, it's able to do backflips and run 30 miles, something like 30 miles an hour, and able to get up and do all sorts of maneuvers and things like this. If you think about this, what is it in this robot that is making it to function the way that it functions? Is it the physical makeup? Is it the steel, the whatever else, the plastic and all the things that go into? That's just physical. That's nothingness. But what is it that's making it do what it does? Right? There's vision built in. There's computation built in. There is obviously this hardware, software layers, and then the software is programmed to give that robot its particular function. Right? Now, if we move to another one, there's other types of robots. You have Boston Dynamics have their own robot, another type of robot. You get some of these which are human-like. They're able to do backflips, and they're able to run and detect an obstacle, and they'll jump over it, right? So again, what's the difference between this Spot Mini, the dog-like one, and this human-like one? Because physically they're just the same. It's the same material, metals, plastics, screws, whatever. It's exactly the same. What's actually the difference between the two things? Right? What's the difference? It's the programming and the coding that's gone behind how they behave and how they react. Right? It's the programming and the coding behind the two. So here what we see is humans creating something and then giving it its guidance. Right? That dog, that robot, that dog has its particular form of creation, meaning its form, its structure, and it's been given its guidance in the form of programming, in the form of software sitting on hardware, right? And likewise in the case of this human as well. There's also another one. You'll find many of these, but there's another one of the I think Chinese or Japanese, and they've got their own robots, and they created a football match between 2 teams of robots. And subhanAllah, you just wonder between the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal and the creation of humans. And So you see them simulating these robots are trying to like play a game of football, and then they're tripping all over the place, and then they're missing, and then and the people have to come on, the team has to come onto the pitch and put them back in order again, and they just it's like disaster, it's everything going wrong. So the point being that this is the extent of what you are able to produce with ilm, with your knowledge, with your wisdom, with your choice, with your power. And it's actually laughable what you've produced. It's laughable what you've produced, right? And clearly behind it, you are programming logic and information and calculations into what you've created, right? So you are the creators, and you are giving guidance to the thing that you've created. And behind all of this, what is it? It is information. It is information, decisions, and so on and so forth. So this is, in and of itself, this is clear evidence that man himself is originated and created by a masterful creator. Because all of his processes, the vision of the eyes, the sound, the processing of these affairs that they go to the brain then calculates and computes. It then makes sense of, for example, a particular smell, and creates a representation of it somehow. It remembers it, likewise with the vision. All of these things are clear evidence that there is knowledge, wisdom, will, and power behind biological life. This is undeniable. So when you ask an atheist, for example, explain to me the vision of this robot and the decision-making capacity of this robot. Is it there by way of prior knowledge, wisdom, will, and power? Or just randomness? Obviously, he's got no choice except to say it is knowledge, will, wisdom, will, and power. And so then how can you deny that for the creation of man? Right? You simply can't make that denial. Obviously, they have other arguments they'll bring in order to justify that denial, but all of it is sophistry. It is sophistry. And that's why, as I said to you before, they have this huge problem of explaining information. I'm going to read to you a paper here. This is a paper. In fact, I'm going to read to you two things. First thing I'm going to read to you is how these people are really, really scared. Right? They are scared that people's intuition, their natural fitra, is able to see through this nonsense. Right? The more they understand, the more they study about biological life, and the more they have to speak about it in what they teach, the more they become scared that as students come and we use the language that we're forced to use, they're going to start holding these beliefs about creator and this and whatever. Right? They're really scared. So I wrote an article on this on about atheism.net, and it's about basically these people, when they study Allah's creation, they are forced to use certain types of language that implies, like machines and regulation and design, and you can't escape using this language. So what these two guys, these atheists, very arrogant atheists, they are saying is that basically the title of the paper is "Why Machine Information Metaphors Are Bad for Science and Science Education." So what he's saying is that when we study the cell and biological life, and we start using all of this language, like explaining life as if it's like there's machines in the cell which carry information, and then which encrypt information, then they decrypt information, and then they put things together and they make decisions and all of this, and we treat like machines. We shouldn't use this language. Why? Because these students might somehow fall into pseudoscience. Right? So very, very scared of this type of language. And so this shows the utter arrogance of these people. Now, one of the things that they say here, I just want to read it to you. He says, we have to be wary of using scientific metaphors that bolster design-like misconceptions about living systems. he says, we argue that the machine information metaphor, meaning speaking about life as if like machines and information, computers, code, encryption, decryption, right? Sending a message, receiving a message, right? Combining messages, making decisions, right? He says that we argue that the machine information metaphor in biology not only misleads students and the public at large, but even direct the thinking of the scientists involved. Meaning that not only will it mislead the students, but even the people who are using the language, they themselves will be affected. Right? So even the teachers, the professors who are using this language, you're going to be affected as well. You're going to start believing in a creator as well and design whatever. Right? So we need to get this language out of the classroom, out of science. That's what they're basically saying. Right? Look at the arrogance of these people. Right? This arrogance you're seeing displayed here is the same arrogance of those people to whom messengers were sent. Right? They physically saw the ayat of Allah Azza wa Jal. Just like these people are physically seeing the ayat of Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is a manifestation of their arrogance. So he says, and therefore, so using this language will affect those scientists and even the kind of questions that they're going to ask and how they approach the questions. Right? So for example, there undoubtedly were very good reasons to pursue the Human Genome Project during the 1990s and the early part of the 21st century. Meaning that they studied the genome in detail, and they said, then he says, but when we start speaking about the blueprint for how human beings are made, right, to start using this language now is very dangerous. He goes on, and using this kind of language, you can see the arrogance which is here. So on the one hand, you can see how they're extremely scared of this whole notion of machines, information, encryption, code, decryption, whatever else. But on the other hand, you have other people. Well, here's a paper now in the Nature magazine. This is the top science magazine in the world, right? And so here's a paper, Life, Logic and Information. Life, Logic and Information. Right, so this guy here is saying we need to scrap this whole language that we're using, right, of machines and information or whatever, because it's brainwashing students. And on the other hand, it's something that you simply cannot escape from. So here you've got life, logic, information, and focusing on information flow will help us to understand better how cells and organisms work. So what this guy is basically saying is that we need to study cells from the angle of information and logic, because that's basically what the cell is really running upon. There's information, it's being transported and moved around. Different parts of the cell are all aware of that same information. And then there is some processing logic that is taking place, as a result of which decisions are made within the cell. Right? And obviously this is a very simplistic description. So what this guy is saying is that we need to find a way as to how we can study the flow of information in detail within a cell. Right? And if you just look at like some of the language here, information management, the study of cells is likely to be particularly effective for this program because the cell is the simplest entity that shows complete biological phenomena. Continues. 2 phases of work are required for such a program, meaning he's actually speaking of a whole program, designing a whole program as to how we are even going to tackle the subject of studying the flow of information. Then he says, 2 phases of work are required for such a program to describe and catalogue the logic circuits. The logic circuits. So this guy over here, this Piglucci or whatever you call him over here, he's squirming at this language here right now, what the language which is being used. Right? To catalogue the logic circuits that manage information. Right? Squirming again. Manage information. Right? So he says in cells, and to simplify analysis of cellular biochemistry so that it can be linked to the logic circuits. So in other words, We need to fathom out what's happening in terms of information. How is information being carried through the molecules, and how is it connected to the logic circuits? Because there's logic circuits within the cell as well, right? And then a bit further, for the first phase, the logic circuits that operate within cells need to be broken down into the individual segments that carry out specific computational functions. One example of such a module is the negative feedback loop, which often operates in a homeostatic manner. Another example is the positive feedback loop. Continues. Combinations of modules will produce more sophisticated outcomes. For example, reversible toggle, switches, timers, and oscillators, all in the cell. Switches, timers, oscillators, right? I mean, this guy's speaking, this is all engineering, engineering, and this man must be having a heart attack right now with this language right here. So he says the behavior of the outputs from modules will be influenced by the shapes of the response. Got all that. Modules could act as a short-term memory device, as seen in a G protein locked in a GPT bound state, or as a long-term digital memory device, as in the case of DNA. A long-term digital memory device, which is what basically DNA basically is. Right, so DNA is like an Oracle database, a MySQL database of code, right, which is taken out and transcribed or translated when needed. Anyway, forget all that. The point being from all of this, these people are seeing the ayat of Allah with their own eyes. Right? The hujjah is qa'imah. So as I said at the beginning, we are not disputing there's no dispute about Allah's existence and that the creation is muhdath, right? That it's makhluq, it's marboob. The evidence by fitrah, by hiss, by aql, and by naql, the four things that we looked, it's already established. That's not even dispute. We're not arguing that. We're just going to argue and dispute your sophistry and how you've constructed these layers of deception, right, to corrupt the fitrah of the people and to corrupt their intellect. And we're going to tear that down to pieces. That's what the discussion is about. Do you understand? So we were saying that this Fir'aun, we were saying basically this argument, there is everything now within developments in science, in artificial intelligence, in robotics, in what they call biomimicry. There's a field called biomimicry, right, where we take biological organisms, we study them, and we get design ideas from them to solve human problems. You can find, this stuff is all online. There are whole millions of research grants, and it's all out there. That is clear evidence that biological life is designed and it runs on information. Now, the arrogance of these people does not stop. Just like we saw with Fir'aun, his arrogance never stopped. The arguments of Musa alayhi salam, he rejected them. Then he saw the two miracles, he rejected them. Then he saw the additional, the calamities, the plagues, he rejected them as well. Right? All of that he continued on. Same with these people. These people, they're trying to solve this problem of information. Where did information come from? So one of the ways that they use is they try to bring these clever labels and terms, right? So there's a label which is called teleology. Teleology. This means that the purpose behind something. The purpose behind something. This is what it means, teleology. That there is a purpose behind something. So what they do is they invent all these fancy labels and they say, there's a new label called teleonomy. And what this means is it explains how information came about. Right? So now they're trying to find a natural explanation as to how information first appeared, on top of which biological life was then able. Do you understand? Right? They're trying to find naturalistic, and we know this is batil because information can only come from one with knowledge. Right? There's no other way about this. Information is only meaningful to one with knowledge. Information doesn't exist unless there's one to make sense of that knowledge. Right? But they're trying to make it look all natural, as if information came about through natural means. This is just playing sophisticated tricks on people. It's like saying to a child that the bottle came on the table, nobody put it there. These are more sophisticated versions of the simplest of deceptive tricks that you play on children. That's all it is. But it's done with all the trickery and deception of cryptic language, detailed technical language, and the use of language as deception. That's how it's done. Right? But reduced to its simplicity, that's all they're doing. They're mocking your mind. They're mocking with your basic senses, your basic reason, your fitrah. That's all it is. Right? With layers and layers of complicated, so you're the one who feels stupid and ignorant, and they're the ones who basically enlightened and whatever. But it's not. You have to penetrate through that sophistry. So anyway, Fir'aun, this argument of Musa alayhi salam, our Lord is the one who gave everything its creation and then give it its guidance. Right? So understand this proof. You see that in robotics, artificial intelligence, even computer software these days. All of that is clear evidence that biological life has an originator and a creator behind it. So anyway, this is the second of the great tyrants, and even he didn't really believe that inwardly. It was just his arrogance that led him to say that. Inwardly he knew and he was convinced of the Lord of Musa alayhi salam. And when he perished, then he said, I now believe in the Lord of that that Moses and his people believe in. It was too late then. So the point being, just like Fir'aun had just nothing but shubuhat, likewise these people have nothing but shubuhat. The proofs are already established, right? It is just the shubuhat that they are bringing in order to confound the truth. And so what they do with the shubuhat is they protect them in a very sophisticated way, and the only difference is in the level of sophistication that is used. The third group that we want to mention here, that in general the atheists, are the Dhahiriyyah, and they are mentioned in the Quran. These people, they're from the pagan Arabs. Not all the pagan Arabs were upon the same thing. Some of them denied resurrection. Some of them, denied creation, things like that. So from them were a group called the Dhahiriyyah. And so Allah says in Surah Al-Jathiyah, Surah 45, verse number 24, وَقَالُوا مَا هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا الدُّنْيَا نَمُوتُ وَنَحْيَا وَمَا يُهْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهْرِ. They say that there is nothing except the life of this world. We live and we die, and nothing destroys us except time. وَمَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. But they have no knowledge of this. They are simply just conjecturing. It's all just conjecture. So basically these people, when you look at the tafsir, these are people who believed that life and death is just simply a continuous cycle, and every 3,000-4,000 years the universe of the world regenerates and comes in this is what they used to believe. And this is no different to what the current atheists believe, except that they have longer time scales, right? They're speaking in billions or trillions of years, right? The universe is eternal. It's just constant cycle of expansion, implosion, they have these different ideas, but it's basically the same thing what is being said here. They deny creation and they deny resurrection. Do they have any evidence for that? No. It is nothing but pure conjecture on their behalf. And that's exactly the same with these people today. Everything that they are saying of the multiverses, all of these other things that they have, the oscillating universe, all of that is pure conjecture and nothing else, with not an ounce of scientific evidence. That's all it is. So, now, from all of this, these are the three people or three categories mentioned in the Quran from which we can see an aspect of, atheism, right? And these people have always been the minority in creation. Why? Because Allah's existence is in the fitrah, it is through hiss, it is through sound reason, and it is through revelation. It is so deeply embedded that there wasn't really any large groups of atheists or things like that. However, we need to look at why and how this, actually came to be, and we need to look at this atheism and understand its various types and what they are basically saying. So we'll speak now. Before we move to atheism, I want to speak about another group in the middle, right? So we have people who believe in a creator and revealed books and resurrection, right? So for example, there's Muslims, and then those who have an altered religion, like the Jews and the Christians, right? But before we go all the way to atheists on this side, there's another group in the middle here that we need to understand. And this group in the middle, they are known as deists or deism. Deism. What these people are saying, deism, is they know there has to be a creator, right? Obviously, the proof is so compelling that they can't deny that there's a creator because it's such compelling proof. So they believe that there was a creator, he created the creation, but then he's got no involvement in it whatsoever. He just left it, wasn't interested in it, and had no connection to it at all. Now what does this mean? This means that therefore there is no revelation, there is no prophethood, there is no messengership, and therefore there is no such thing as religion. So in other words, there are people who exist who believe in a creator, but they are deists. They reject what they call organized religion. So they don't believe in a book or revelation or in prophethood or in all the other things of resurrection and accountability. All that is they completely deny all of basically of the pillars of many of the pillars of Iman. So these are known as deists, and these people exist. And obviously they know that the proof for a creator is compelling and cannot be denied. So many of the atheists, you will see them, atheists who, they won't go from atheism to, for example, Islam or Judaism or Christianity. They'll go from atheism to deism because they have many other shubuhat that relate to, for example, revelation, prophethood, resurrection, and things of that nature. So these people do exist. And we need to be clear that it is not just, religion and then atheism. There's actually something in between known as deism as well. And people can fluctuate from here to here and here to here. So once that's clear, once we're clear about that, we now move into atheism. So atheism, essentially, it's denial of the existence of a creator or a maker for this creation. However, they won't, because there's different types amongst them, they won't say, some of them won't clearly say, I reject the existence of a creator. They will say, I don't believe there is proof for a creator. I don't believe there's evidence for a creator. So we can divide them into two categories. The first category are those whom we call the strong atheists. Strong atheism. These are the ones who will come out and they will basically blatantly say, there is no God, outright. There is no God at all, right? And they will say, so these are people who have certainty in what they are saying. These we call the strong atheists. Then you have, these people are not the most intelligent of people for making this claim, for reasons I will explain. Then you have the weak atheists. These are the ones who will basically, they won't make an outright bold claim, there is no God, there is no creator, but they will say, I don't know. I don't know whether there is one or there isn't one. It's just that the evidences haven't been established with me. So I don't know either way. These people are more intelligent than the previous ones, and they are more honest in what they are saying. And this is because the first group who say there is no God, if you ask them, well, okay, tell me what criterion or what evidence would satisfy you that there is a creator? Because if you're making a denial, obviously you've made that denial on the basis of some criterion. What is that criterion that you have used to say there is no God? And so this is where the contradiction comes in, because according to them, the only route to knowledge is science and the scientific method. And the scientific method can only deal with what they call nature and natural causes and effects. But the creator is outside of nature. So science itself cannot give you that answer. It cannot determine the answer of whether there is a creator or there is not a creator. Right? So these people, when they come out and they make the claim, there is no creator, this is nothing but pure conjecture on their behalf. This is pure conjecture, right? Because for you to make that claim, you have to provide, okay, what's the criterion that you've used? And the answer is there is no criterion that can ever be used to answer this question. So this means that what you're saying is nothing but pure conjecture. So now many of the other atheists have realized this is a flaw in the argument, right? That you can't come out and say outright, there is no creator. Because then you put yourself in a very difficult position. So therefore what they've done is, they've changed the statement a little bit. And they said, well, by atheism we simply mean that anyone who makes the claim God exists, we don't believe there's sufficient proof for that. We don't believe there's sufficient evidence for that. Right? So they're trying to escape because they're in a corner now. And then again, the same problem. Okay, well, tell me, what is the nature of the evidence that will determine this question? And so we come to the same problem again. So anyway, point being, what you need to know is that strong atheists who make the outright bold and audacious claim, there is no creator. And then you have the ones who are agnostic. So these people are just there in shock. They're in shock with respect to their atheism. They don't really know. They're confused, and they haven't, one way or the other. So the reality is that the evidence exists, as we've already established. There's no doubt about the creator, and all these people have doubts and conjectures in various different forms and manifestations, right? So when you deny a creator, you are forced to explain life using purely material means, right? So with atheism, it comes as a package. Now we're going to move into the packages that come with atheism. If you deny that there is knowledge, wisdom, will, power, and a purpose behind life, then all you've got left to play with is matter and nothing else. And so with this matter, it comes with a package deal. Right? A package deal. We'll come and look into that, inshallah. With the prophets and messengers, there is a creator with knowledge, will, power, wisdom. There is a purpose behind creation. There is truth. There is justice. There is resurrection. There is accountability. There is right and wrong, halal and haram, moral and immoral, beneficial and harmful. All these things exist within creation. Right? So along with that comes everything else. There is beneficial knowledge. There are beneficial sciences. There are righteous actions. There are absolutes of right and wrong. There is accountability to establish justice. All these things come together. That's what the prophets and messengers come with. With this now, once you move into this direction and you deny a creator, then you are forced to make a purely material explanation of life. Meaning there's only matter and nothing else. Right? So this is now where they have to start resorting to all the deceptive technical language to deceive you into thinking that life comes about by itself. Right? And all these things come about by random interaction. This is all now where the games are being played in terms of the actual language being used. So how and why did this happen? Well, in brief, for shortage of time, we'll simply say that during the 19th, 18th, 19th and 20th century, people began to study nature and the causes within nature, and they realized that we've learnt a tremendous amount about nature. And what they said, they devised a system which they call methodological naturalism, which basically means we'll treat nature as if it's just nature and nothing else, and we'll study it in terms of causes and effects and ways and means, and we'll learn a tremendous about nature in this manner. So what they've done, if you think about it, there's three things. There is the sabab. A sabab is the cause. There is the musabbab, which is the effect. And then there is the musabbib, which is the one who placed the cause and the effect. Right? So there is the sabab, the cause, and there is the effect, and there is the one who caused the cause and the effect, the musabbib. So what they do is they eliminate the musabbib and just deal at the causes and the effects. So to explain, like for example, the sun gives off light. That light is, the energy that then allows plants to grow, and the plants in turn grow and they lead to something else. So we have cause and effect here, right? So they will study that process of how this all takes place. What is the energy from the sun? How is the leaf absorbing the energy? Then it goes on to all the photos, all the rest of it, whatever, yeah? So they are saying, let's study the sabab and the musabbab, and we will gain tremendous amount of knowledge about nature. And what they've done is they've eliminated the musabbib, the one who is the placer of the cause and the effect. So in this manner, what they did was basically they eliminated the musabbib from the entire equation of everything. Like if I was to give the same example I gave to you before of a cash machine or a 3D printer, right? You can study the 3D printer and the cash machine and look at the cause-effect mechanisms, and you can reverse engineer what's happening and then reproduce it yourself. Just ship it over to China or Japan and then have it produced the next morning or whatever else. You can do all that, and you are just looking at the sabab and the musabbab. But you've eliminated the musabbib, right? But you don't need the musabbib to decipher what is really taking place in this cash machine and the 3D printer. You can reverse engineer and make it yourself once you've studied the ways and means, right? So you can eliminate the musabbib. But this is what they are doing. They are eliminating the musabbib, who is the one who ties together the causes and their effects, right? So the causes and the effects, we can see them in every whether we look at the liver and the heart and the kidneys and the brain and the eyes and the ears, how everything is coordinated in a certain manner. There is sabab, there are causes and effects, but there is the musabbib who put them all together in the way that they are. So what they began to do was to basically study nature in this way. They made great advancements, and so they developed a system of studying nature in which they eliminated the musabbib, the khaliq, right, the sani' from the equation. And so they call this methodological naturalism, right? Then they turn this into philosophical natural, which then became like a religion, like a philosophy, that yes, there is no creator and it's just matter and nothing else, and we just study. Science can only be used to study just nature without the need of a creator, right? So they turned it from a method into then like a religion. It becomes a religion. So now, as I said to you before, a whole package comes along with this. Once you have only matter to work with, then you start getting all these other philosophies, all of these other ideas, right? So then you start getting all of these different orientations that come about. So for example, you'll start getting Darwinism will appear, like that idea has to appear. Then at some point in time, you're going to have to explain how life emerged. And at some point in time, there's going to appear a man who's going to have to provide the basis for this idea of the emergence of life. That man just happened to be Darwin, right? There had to inevitably be a Darwin at some point or the other, right? So he came along and he brought out this notion that life has a common origin, and so on and so forth, whatever. Then you can have other orientations to explain the origin of the universe, Einstein, those kind of people. Then you can have ideas in philosophy. All these philosophies are going to start appearing now. So that's why you see in the 19th, 20th century, all these lifestyle philosophies start appearing based upon just a material explanation of the universe. So you start getting people like, this man, Jean-Paul Sartre. Life is just, it's called existentialism, right? So life is just personal freedom, pursue your lusts, pursue your desires, make your own reality, make your own truth. That's what truth is, right? So what I'm saying is that and then you also have economic doctrines come to play now, like Marxism, and then you have secularism, how to govern people without religion, right? And then you have like the socialism. And so basically this whole package now starts developing on the back of a purely material explanation of life, and it brings with it tremendous chaos and ruin and destruction, right? So what you are seeing right now of undermining gender, the spread of homosexuality, and all this LGBTIQ XYZ whatever, and then indoctrinating children to take them away from their nature. Basically, it's degradation of society. The basic fundamental facts and realities of human nature that we know from revealed books, all of that is gone, and what you're seeing is complete and total disintegration in every aspect, right? So you have problems with drugs, you have problems with alcohol, you have economic issues of where people are being robbed of their money through economic doctrines, right? Central banking practices, riba, all the rest of it, right? And then they're being, in so many ways, these people are being looted and destroyed, and their fitrah and their aql is being changed and altered, and all of it is on the back of these notions and these ideas, right? Of this. So that's what I'm saying. I said to you before that this comes with it's like a package deal. It's a package deal, right? You start with materialism, you're going to end up with these consequences that you are seeing now within these societies. So they have science with them, science that begins with a materialist premise, that we start off with materialism as a belief, then we build science on the back of that. Then you have philosophy as well. Then you have all the other stuff that comes off, from the back of all of that. So this is what has developed in general in the West, right? In the institutions of science, in education, in entertainment, in everything, you're seeing a permeation of this materialist ideology. And that's why Shaykh Saleh Aal, why I mentioned at the very beginning of this lecture, I quoted from his statement. He basically said in that statement that what we are seeing now is a worldwide, it's taghrib. It's like pushing this culture of materialism across the whole of the globe, right into the Muslim lands, and this is made possible by way of the internet and social media and things like that. So we need to be alert to this and be aware of this, because it all comes with, as we said, this whole entire package, right? Then you start buying into the scientific conjectures. Then you start buying into the philosophy itself, the lifestyle philosophy of pursuing lusts and desires and pastimes and things like that. And then along comes it with the economic doctrines as well, right? And then so on and so forth. So this is like really a corrosive force. And again, we are speaking in just very generals and general ways, because this is a very, very deep topic. And so we want to move on now to the actual causes of atheism. There are 12 in number, which I have here, and we'll try to summarize them as quickly and briefly as possible, inshallah ta'ala. So obviously there are causes, and the cures are known by looking at these causes. So the first of those causes is the spread of conjectural, speculative sciences of the disbelievers, and in particular two of them, which is the Big Bang cosmology, and secondly, the neo-Darwinism, or this notion of evolution. Now, both of these, we cannot do justice to these two things in a lecture like this. They are very deep topics. I refer you to two separate documents. The first document on the Big Bang is an article you'll find on the website aqidah.com, aqidah.com. There's a 30-40 page article on Big Bang cosmology and the Quran. You can refer to that for more detail. To put it in a nutshell to you, how this Big Bang cosmology appeared. Now this is where, if an atheist is listening now to what I'm going to say, he'll probably start laughing. He'll probably have fits of laughter. And you think, look at these stupid madmen speaking about this nonsense or whatever. But in reality, it's the other way around. It's the other way around. Right? They are the madmen and the fools who've been duped and hoodwinked and have their intellect stolen. Right? So to understand what I'm getting at here is that this whole cosmology that you are brainwashed with in school ever since the early 20th century, that whole cosmology appeared because of a specific reason. And that specific reason was that all of the empirical experiments in the 19th century proved that the earth is completely stationary and is not moving at all. This is what the science of the 19th century established, right? And there are many, many statements. This is simply a historical fact. This is undeniable. But most of these people never ever come across this information. So when you tell an atheist this, inside he'll be thinking, oh my gosh, this is a lunatic that I'm speaking to. Up until you whip out the statements of Einstein and all the other biographers of Einstein and all the scientists and whatever the historians, until you whip out their statements and you start reading the statements. Then it's like, you just give them a backhand and they're just dazed and dazzled, right? So this is a historical fact, right? That in the 19th century, the instrumentation was available, the machines, devices to actually test physically, is the earth in motion or not? So without going to all the details, there were a whole range of experiments done over 70, 80 years, and this completely baffled them because they thought, hang on, what is going on here? The Copernican system of the earth moving, it can't be proven empirically. It's falsified empirically. So this was the biggest problem at the end of the 19th century. How are we going to solve this problem of a stationary earth? And so this is clearly documented in the actual sources. And I've 8 or 9 statements here from many of famous. Arthur Eddington is a famous physicist. He's speaking historically about this in his book. There was just one alternative. The Earth's true velocity through space might happen to be nil. Meaning these experiments couldn't detect the Earth's motion, so they're trying to find all these different explanations to run away from the actual thing that it was saying. Right? So these physicists and, they're basically saying, look, there's only one alternative that they had, which is to basically admit the Earth is not moving. Another one, physicist Bernard Jaffe, the data of this experiment were almost unbelievable. There was only one other possible conclusion to draw, that the Earth was at rest. Right? I can go on and on. There's the book here, a biography of Einstein. The Michelson-Morley experiment confronted scientists with an embarrassing alternative. So he's talking about these experiments only left them with 2 options. One option is to say, right, everything we've understood about light, magnetism, electricity, we've only understood it because we've assumed that there's a universal medium that's present everywhere, and that's how light, electricity and magnetism, how it works, right? Just like in water, you've got waves. You can't have waves without water, without the medium of water. And just like you can't have sound without the medium of air. In a similar manner, the phenomena of electricity, magnetism, things like that, you can't have it unless there's a medium everywhere. So there's only 2 ways you can escape from these experiments. One is to say that there's no such thing as this medium, in which case you have to scrap everything you know about electricity, magnetism, and whatever else, and start from scratch, which they didn't want to do. Or the other option was to basically admit that the Earth is completely stationary, which is what the experiments were saying. Or the third option is to basically invent something new to explain away the experiments. Right? So what they did was they went for this third option to invent some newfangled ideas to explain away these experiments, that the Earth is completely still and is not moving at all. So this is where Einstein came in with his ideas, and on the back of Einstein's ideas, this Belgian priest came along and came with the Big Bang cosmic egg, and on the back of that, a few other people came along, and then they constructed this idea that we're given today of the Big Bang cosmology of the universe. All of this is pure speculation. It's pure speculation. And if you dig down deep enough, you'll find that there are all these assumptions and conjectures in the way that they, the way that they construct the model itself. Anyway, long story short, I don't want to go into this for too much detail. Basically, they have successfully managed to convey the idea that these models are based on empirical science when they are not. Right? They are conjectures in which there is some science involved, but there are assumptions and conjectures involved in these theories. So, as Muslims, we need to understand, we need to dig down and look at the foundations of these ideas and how they do not meet the standards of scientific inquiry. Right? These ideas do not meet neither the Big Bang cosmology it does not meet the standards of the actual scientific method, right? Which is repeatability, testability, falsifiability, empiricism, and also the right type of reasoning. And likewise, the same can be said of the claim that all biological life appeared, just by random, interactions of matter and then evolved. Likewise, this is not an actual hard science. It is not like a scientific hypothesis, because it can't be, that claim of random mutations cannot be testable in a lab. By its very nature, it is not a scientific theory, right? If you bring randomness into any theory, it's no longer scientifically testable anymore. Randomness does not agree with science. You can't bring randomness into experiments, right? So by the very nature, these theories are actually conjectures. They're conjectures. They cannot be subject to the scientific method. This, again, is a very detailed topic. Now, if you speak about it in very broad terms, some atheist is going to come along and say, oh no, you misrepresented, and you this or whatever. So I'm making a disclaimer here. What I'm saying is that there's a lot more to this topic than what can be presented in 5 minutes. Go back to the articles on about atheism.net with respect to evolution. There's a whole series of articles in PDF form dealing with that, and likewise with Big Bang cosmology. And these require a topic in and of itself. All you need to know is that these are conjectures, and the specific claims that they are making cannot be backed by the scientific method, right? So the claim that random mutations lead to new biological designs, whatever, this is nonsense. There's no scientific proof for it whatsoever. This is like saying having 1 million characters, digital characters, and expecting that the language known as HTML and JavaScript is going to develop by itself. And then once that language is developed, the JavaScript and HTML, all of a sudden we're going to, then CSS is going to develop, and then somehow some web application is going to, appear. And then it's just nonsense. It's just stupidity. There's no scientific evidence that can or has ever taken place. It's impossible. It's logically impossible to even happen. So it's a no-starter from the very beginning. Anyway, that's the first reason. The first reason is successfully presenting these conjectures as actual certainties and realities when it's not. As for the Big Bang, there are thousands of scientists who've written a rejection of this belief. Right? They've rejected it as something that's constantly requiring new inventions just to patch it up and to make it appear to be valid. Anyway, that's all topic in itself. Second reason, in fact, really I should have begun. I've got them numbered in the wrong order. That was actually number 2. The first number in my list with the cause of atheism is actually ignorance of the proofs of Tawheed. That should have come first. The first major reason is ignorance of the proofs of the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, and specifically the evidences for His Rububiyyah. And we already spoke about that briefly in the lesson early on. And part of that reason is that we are raised in Muslim households, mostly just blind following. And obviously there's nothing wrong with following the deen of your parents when it is the true deen, right? However, there's a danger that if you do not instill the evidences of Rububiyyah into your children, then they will not be equipped to deal with the shubuhat that might come later from all of these conjectures and materialism and all these other notions and ideas. So basically, ignorance of the proofs of Tawheed and essentially blindly following. And this is a difference between Muslims and others. We've been ordered in the Quran, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know, have knowledge, have the knowledge that there is none which has the right to be worshipped except Allah. So it has to be upon ilm, with barahin, with evidences. So we need to produce children who understand the nature of evidence and how we establish Allah's rububiyyah, and they are to be taught the evidences in the Quran of the various prophets and messengers, because they are the simplest, most apparent and easiest to understand evidences. So the first one is basically a general ignorance, and there are certain times and places where a type of knowledge is kind of neglected or lost. And that's why the scholars, you see Shaykh Saleh Aal, Shaykh and others saying that we need to promote and emphasize the evidences of the rububiyyah of Allah Azza wa Jal, and instill children and students and whatever, until even in the mosques where we already have believers, to remind them of the evidences of rububiyyah. That's number one, factor number one. And you can see, obviously, we mentioned the cause, and the cure is obvious from the cause. Yeah? So the cause is obviously ignorant jahl. And what is the cure? The cure is to address this field in terms of knowledge. Second, then, which I put here, was obviously the success of conjectural speculative sciences. This is a great danger for people who are not equipped when they go into institutions and they study and they become affected by the philosophy, the ideology, and the whole way of thinking, and they haven't got the means and the ability to see through the sophistry, behind the whole setup that they have in terms of the speculative conjectural sciences. So number two, the success. So a Muslim comes along and he believes that these people are upon something and these are certainties, and he doesn't know that this is just pure conjecture and pure speculation. Number three, and again they're in no particular order, is that many people see the technological, industrial, economic advancements of Western nations, and they somehow wrongly believe that this was as a result of atheism. Well, this is not true. In the past, there are nations who came and went, and they were more powerful and more strong, as Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions in Surah Ar-Rum, أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, do they not travel through the earth? فَيَنْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. Do they not travel through the earth and see how was the end of those who came before them? كَانُوا أَشَدَّ مِنْهُمْ قُوَّةً وَآثَارُوا الْأَرْضَ وَعَمَرُوهَا أَكْثَرَ مِمَّا عَمَرُوهَا. That these people, they came, they were even stronger in power than them, and they traversed and they conquered and they populated the earth more than what these people populated and built up the earth. So the fact that nations become advanced in technology and industry, whatever, all of this is from the action of Allah Azza wa Jal. He gives nations strength, He gives them means, He gives them ways, and it is not that any one particular belief, as if atheism was behind all of this, or as if it's not true. There were many idol worshipping nations in the past who were extremely advanced in their knowledge of, for example, astronomy and calculation and things of that nature, or industry or whatever else. They were extremely advanced. So this has got nothing to do with your particular belief, what belief you have. It just simply requires applying your knowledge and understanding of the causes and effects, and if you put the time and the effort and whatever, then Allah, you will get strength. So strength is not a sign of being upon truth, and that is very clear from the stories of the nations in the Quran. Nations were destroyed. They were more advanced and more powerful than you. So unfortunately, many people, they look and they see that they develop an inferiority complex, and they think that Muslims are backward and whatever else, and that there must be something in this as to why these nations are so advanced. And that is not true at all. That's false reasoning and false argumentation. And often what you will see is that many of these causes that I'm mentioning, they will work together. It's not just like one cause, it's multiple causes working together on an individual that will then lead him to atheism. Right? So that's number three. Number four is kind of connected to the ignorance of the deen. It's basically, many people are brought upon a cultural, traditional understanding of religion. So really, Islam to them is just really, it's a culture, it's a tradition. It's not a matter of haqq and batil, right? It's something that this is what I have in my culture. So many people are raised, in fact in many Muslim households, they just follow what their parents are doing as if it's like tradition and culture. And the parents don't take the time to teach and make it clear to the children that this is haqq and batil, Tawheed and shirk, Iman and kufr, halal and haram, Islah and fasad. Islah meaning rectification, and fasad meaning corruption. Right? So they don't explain to them the wisdoms behind the halal and the haram and the ahkam or whatever else. So they lead them just to grow, and they're following like a tradition. It's like they're following a tradition and a culture. And that's why you see the phenomenon now of, like, you'll see women dressed in hijab because that's what's in their household. And yet you'll see them like they're committing fornication, drinking, whatever else. And the whole lifestyle is no different to a mushrik, to a kafir, right? To a whatever, typical whatever, right? And this is the end result of allowing this jahl to continue, and this in the household. So that's number 4. Number 5 reason is there are some people who basically they want to pursue their lusts, want to pursue their desires, and they see in Islam a restraint for their desires. They see in the halal and haram a restraint, and then they see the liberal culture in the West, and they see these people having fun, having a good time, enjoying themselves, whatever else. And really, to be honest, all of this is just on the surface. This is just on the surface. So they see these societies, the outward appearance of these societies, and because their hearts are inclined to such things, then what came first is the hawa, the desire. And then came afterwards the rational justification for following that hawa. Oh, I'm an atheist because the Big Bang proves that whatever else, and evolution and this and whatever else, and but that's not what came first. It's really the hawa that drove you. Now you're trying to find a rational justification to justify what you are doing. This is the case with many, not all apostates are as fickle-minded as this. Many apostates have shubuhat, they have doubts, right? But many of them are actually like this. They are fickle, and really, it's they want the hawa, they want the lust, they want the desire, they want the shahwa, and then comes all of the arguments come afterwards. The arguments against Islam, this whatever. So the hawa came first, and the rational justification came afterwards. But as I said, not all apostates or atheists are actually like this. Some of them actually they have genuine shubuhat. It is something intellectual for them. So we can't put them all into the same category and dismiss them as all after shahawat. There are people who have shubuhat, and they need to be addressed in a particular way. Reason number 5 is that is bid'ah, the presence of bid'ah within among Muslims, something which is muharraf, mubaddal. You have Shiism, you have Sufism, you have many. Qadianis are not Muslims to begin with, but many apostates are Qadianis. They become atheists, right? And some of them become actually Christians or other than that. And that's because they're upon a muharraf, mubaddal, batil religion, which they treat to be Islam. And then when they see things that don't, are not correct in that muharraf, mubaddal religion, because the reason sometimes can see something is false. So in a muharraf, mubaddal religion, altered, distorted, fabricated religion, you're going to see things that you don't agree with. And so that the presence of these types of bid'ahs and khurafat among the Muslimin is one of the reasons and causes why some people abandon Islam. Right? They are using reason in a right way in many cases, because they are rejecting what is muharraf and mubaddal and something that is not correct. But obviously they are misguided from other aspects, from other angles. So bid'ah is one of the factors. Number 7 is the presence of the people of speculation and false argument, the people of Kalam, again people of bid'ah. They come along and they use weak and false arguments in defense of Islam. This happened historically in Islam from the first people of Kalam, the Jahmiyyah. They tried to prove Allah's existence with flawed philosophical arguments, and as a result they created much turmoil amongst the Muslims and confusion and doubt. They are known as the people of Kalam, Ilmul Kalam. And Kalam is not something that's just historical and it came and it went. Kalam is always present. Kalam is to use the speculations of the non-Muslims, the speculative sciences, in order to defend Islam. This is something that always continues and takes place. And that's why we have today, there are the people of Kalam, the modern people of Kalam. People like Zakir Naik, for example, and people like, many names, Abdul Majid Az-Zindani, people like that. They take the speculative theories and ideas of the disbelievers, and then they try to argue that they are in the Quran, right? To impress the non-Muslims, right? In the field of science. So these are just conjectures, and all you are doing is you are building extremely weak foundations for Iman. And people whose iman is built upon these speculations and conjectures, they will very quickly fall into atheism and disbelief and apostasy when they see that all of this really there's no basis to it at all. So the presence of these people and what they've been doing and the way they've been arguing for the past 10, 15, 20, 25 years, this is a major cause behind the appearance of atheism amongst Muslims, and especially with people like Zakir Naik, who peddle many lies against the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal. From them is the claim that the universe is expanding, and they lie upon the Book of Allah. وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا, the heaven we constructed it, بِأَيْدٍ, with power. وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ, and indeed we are. They translate this to mean we are expanding. They say, look, this is a proof now for the expansion of the universe. How did the Quran know that the universe was expanding 1400 years ago and before Hubble came along or whatever else, the redshift or whatever? Right? This is kadhib upon the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal, because this is not the meaning of the ayah. The meaning of the ayah is that Allah Azza wa Jal created the heaven expansively, it's huge, and He is able to increase and expand the means of provision therein. This is the meaning of the ayah. And they do the same with many other ayat in the Quran. Put things into the ayat which are not even in there. Right? And then this you are setting people up to have shaky foundations for their iman. Right? And as soon as someone comes along and says, well, in the next 10, 20 years, well, actually, the universe is not expanding, we were totally wrong. Because we made a mistake on the redshift, we assumed it meant velocity, but actually Hubble was totally wrong. Even he himself said, this is wrong, I don't accept it, we need to change this idea. So someone can come along and just, and all of a sudden the foundation of what you built your iman upon is totally gone. This is not, so the presence of these people amongst the Muslims are one of the main reasons for people, turning back on their faith, and they're setting people up for apostasy by bringing weak, false, fallacious arguments. That's number 7. Number 8, so again, as each of these is the cause, and then the cure, you know what the cure is automatically. Right? The cue here is don't go to the long-winded nonsense of the Ahlul Kalam. Stick to the simple, strong proofs of the prophets and messengers, and go to the people who explain them. Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim, Imam Sa'di, and things like that. Right? So in all the ones that I mentioned, same with Bidah, we know that's the cause. What's the cure? Pursuits of lust and desires. What's the cure for that? Train your soul. So we've got the cause and the cure. You can work that out. Number 8. Bad experiences in many of Muslim cultures and societies. So for example, you'll have one who was put into a forced marriage. You'll have another woman, on a revenge in some place in Sudan or, the Indian, Pakistani subcontinent. You'll have someone who's been, genital mutilation that they have in Africa in some nations, which they took from the Egyptians from many thousands of years back, and then they stick it onto Islam, right? Just general, and then you have like a lot of tribalism and fanaticism which exists within tribes, and all of this brings about like a culture of maltreatment, right? Particularly of women in certain societies. So these women are raised in these societies, and they can't distinguish between what Islam is and what this oppressive, harmful culture is, and the practices that it might have. So they come up, and then they turn against Islam. They become apostates, and so these are bad experiences which exists, and this is because obviously Muslims are far from Islam, from the ahkam of the Sharia, from the adl which it commands, and so this itself requires treatment. Number 9 is the doubts of the apostates, hypocrites, disbelievers, and they have many shubahat about the Quran first of all, and then the Prophet ﷺ, and then the Sharia itself, the ahkam of the Sharia, and then just the Muslims, right? So the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ, and the Sharia, and then just Muslim societies in general. So for example, about the Quran, they will come and say, oh, the Quran is wrong because we now know that the sun is the sun is stationary in the earth, and your Quran says that the sun moves, right? So they bring shubuhat from their conjectures, and the conjectures that they bring, whether it's to do with the compilation of the Quran or alleged contradictions of the Quran, or the Quran promotes violence, or the Quran doesn't agree with scientific whatever else. All these, they have these shubuhat. about the Prophet ﷺ, his marriages, about war, about things of that nature. They'll bring arguments. He was mad, he took from the Jews and Christians, he was being taught, he was this, whatever. All shubuhat about that. So these are spread, and for Muslims out there without knowledge, and he starts soaking up these shubuhat, this is going to affect his mind and his heart. Likewise about the Sharia, the ahkam in the Sharia, and likewise about Muslim societies in general. So again, this is a topic in itself. I can't delve too much on this, but just be aware that there are doubts of the apostates and hypocrites and disbelievers spreading lies and misconceptions, and these require scholarly responses. It requires a return to the scholars and knowledge-based answers to these questions, which do exist. A person has to go and seek and pursue them with honesty and with integrity. Many of these atheists, you will see, these apostates, these are just excuses really for their apostasy. There's some other reason behind, there's some trauma that they had, some really bad experience that you had in your society. You had FGM, you became genitally mutilated, your parents treated you wrong, right? You didn't get your education, you're really angry, you got a chip on your shoulder now, right? And you rebel against that society. Then you come out, you become an apostate. Now you want to find arguments. Okay, how can I justify my apostasy? Start finding arguments. Oh, well, then. So this is where all these kind of arguments, they come along now, right? So you have to understand that not all these apostates, it's not, yes, I am now an enlightened, rational being, and I've rejected. It's not like that. Right? Many of these people actually have these traumatic, bad experiences, and that's the real, true underlying cause behind. The rest of it now is just trying to find ways and means to justify that choice. Number 10, I believe we are on, is the presence of extremism and terrorism and the whole, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and all this violence and nonsense and whatever else. Again, this comes back down to ignorance of Aqidah. If you are ignorant of Aqidah, you will not know that these people are the Khawarij, whom the Messenger told us about. We have certainty that they are the Khawarij, because their ideas are exactly the same, their actions are exactly the same as the first Khawarij, the Muhakkima and the Azarika and the Najadat, right? These people who came along. We have certainty that they are the Khawarij mentioned in the text, and this is a proof to us of the truthfulness of the Messenger of Allah, right? From the foreknowledge that he was given, that he mentioned these people would arise in every generation, they would create turmoil, kill the Muslims, rebel, and they would be cut off each time, right? And they have these doctrines and these ideas. So some weak-hearted, naive people will come along and they see something like, 911 or something, and it'll shock the system, right? And also there's a degree of naivety with some of these people as well, because they don't really understand the world and not everything is really what it appears to be. So, and they will ascribe everything, all the terrorism, to these fanatical Muslims, when really a lot of the time it's intelligence agencies are involved. Like in Algeria, for example, when the civil war was taking place, it was the French government and other people coming along, and they were instigating massacres dressed as Arabs, and then the Khawarij would come along and instigate it. So in these situations, there's a complex mix of what's really taking place. There are hands that are playing the role in funding some of these extremist groups, right, to lead to certain goals and objectives. So we know this already, that the Khawarij are a calamity upon Islam and the Muslims, and wherever they appear, they destabilize nations and societies. So we know this from our Aqidah. This is from our Aqidah to know all of this. So jahl of Aqidah, and then not being able to react to these affairs of like the Khawarij and the extremists and the terrorists, whatever. This is again another reason that pushes people, towards, along with other factors as well, towards atheism. Number 11, the whole issue of al-qada wal-qadar and the issue of evil, again comes back to jahl, right? So we see these people, atheists in the West, saying, well, death, disease, famine, poverty, hunger, war. How can you explain this? How is there a God? And how is this just when all of this is just sophistry that they are speaking? And so if a person understands the issue of al-asma wa sifat, and the issue of al-qada wal-qadar, and the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal, and the topic of al-hikmah wa ta'leel, which is the wisdom behind Allah's actions, all of this a person studies and knows and understands, it will resolve all of these issues that they raise about death, disease, calamity, war, famine, poverty, injustice, and all the other stuff that they bring. So al-qada wal-qadar, the issue of evil, our scholars have discussed this in detail. Ibn al-Qayyim, Ibn Taymiyyah in their books. All of this is satisfactory answer. The person can refer back to those issues to address those particular shubuhat. And number 12, we finish with. So you can see that all these factors will often work together in one individual, right? A collection, sometimes there'll be 5 or 6 of them will work together. Sometimes it'll be like multiple factors that come to play. But the 12th, which we shouldn't dismiss, is just outright pure arrogance. There are some people, it is just pure kibr and nothing else. And these are people like we mentioned, Fir'aun and people like that. There are people who are like that today, right? There's no other factor. It's just pure arrogance. You are too arrogant to acknowledge that there is an authority over this universe, and you can't accept that. You're too arrogant to accept that, and it's too uncomfortable for you to accept that. So you want to live your life upon other than that, right? So it's just pure arrogance. There's no other reason or explanation. It is pure arrogance. So you find that there are some Muslims who apostatize because of arrogance that they develop. And I came across one of them. I spoke to one of them in America on the phone for about an hour and a half. This young boy of about 14, 15. And this is what happens with these people. They have a bit of intelligence. So obviously you're intelligent. And then you go through the system and you believe everything that you're told. And then you start looking down. You start thinking, oh, wait a minute. I'm so clever and I'm so intelligent. And everyone else is just thick and stupid. And I can now see, I've learned all these things in science and physics or whatever. And what they do is, if there's arrogance, if there's people who kind of have this seed of arrogance, it'll develop into something else. And then when you speak to this guy and you ask him like the most basic things about history of science and things like that, you'll say, well, what's that? What's that? Who's so-and-so? Who's Hubble? Who's Einstein? I haven't got a clue. It's totally clueless. All they've done is just blindly followed whatever they've been fed with no rational, critical thinking faculties, and think now that they are somehow superior than everybody else. But that's only because there was a seed of arrogance to begin with in the first place. And that seed of arrogance will eventually lead you to disbelief and apostasy. Right? So in some cases, it is pure arrogance that came first. The rest of it was just a means of it's like you have a seed of, you plant a seed in the soil and the rain, water and everything else comes along and it just grows, turns into a plant. In a similar manner, you have a seed of arrogance. That seed of arrogance is in your heart. Then that seed of arrogance is going to be nurtured by whatever experiences you go through and whatever things you soak up. It's going to nurture you and out, and it's going to develop into kufr and zandaqa. Now some people who are like that. So people who have this seed of arrogance, they're going to be drawn towards this kind of direction. So these are the 12. So as you can see, there are causes, and the cures obviously are contained within understanding what the actual cause is in itself. So we'll have to come to an end here. We've obviously been going for a good few hours now. So this is a complex topic. We've just introduced the topic and given you some food for thought, inshallah ta'ala. But perhaps on other occasions we can go into maybe a Sa'di's book, or maybe look at some other materials in order to address this subject in a more systemized, in a more systematic manner, inshallah ta'ala. But hopefully there's been some food for thought from today's lesson. And I must obviously emphasize this disclaimer that I want to make, that when you speak in generalities, which you have to in a discussion like this, it's possible for someone to take a general statement and oppose you in that general statement. Like I've spoken about cosmology, I've spoken about evolution, and this circumstance doesn't allow to go into the details. So I want to make it clear that these are general details, and as for the specific detailed issues, the claims that we're making that these are conjectural and speculative, we can prove that. We can prove that with evidence, with hardcore evidence, that these are just pure conjectures and nothing else. And we are prepared to do that. We have the evidence for that. But in a general lecture, we just make general statements suited to the audience. So just want that to be made very, very clear, that you speak in accordance with the nature of the audience. And as for what the claims that we've made, we can back up those claims with evidence will that meet the standards of scientific evidence? So obviously, because I know that people will be, many listeners of different backgrounds going to be listening to the recording, so I want that point to be made very, very, very clear from the very beginning. So inshallah, we'll stop here. If there are any questions that you want to ask, we can dedicate a short amount of time to that, inshallah ta'ala. But I do refer you back to the documents I said. Go to aboutatheism.net and likewise to aqidah.com. 2 documents on cosmology and evolution. You'll see that discussed in a lot more detail. This article is published in the Nature magazine. It's in a section that they feature called Horizons, where they're discussing like future developments in science and what direction we need to go to. It's by a guy called Paul Nurse, and it's July 24th of 2008. And you can see he's got a picture of like an organism, you know, exactly like a machine, right? Exactly what this Piglucci guy here, Mario Piglucci, was whining and moaning about, right? So here in this article, he's got a whole machine-like looking character by which he's representing the cell, and he's called the organism, right? So you cannot escape from machine type language. You just can't escape it. If you're going to discuss biological life, you cannot escape it, right? So you're basically just banging your head against the wall when you try to come up with this nonsense about, you know, we need to remove this language from education and science. It's impossible. It's impossible. That's why you cannot separate fitra and creation are inseparable. These two are just completely bound like this. That's what they're trying to do. What the guy's saying here when he's saying we need to not use this language when we're teaching because it might lead these students to whatever, he's trying to separate, he's trying to erase the fitra. We can't do that. The fitra is fitra and fatir, the same root, fatara. You know, the innate disposition and origination and creation. You can't separate these two. It's locked like this. And you can see this clearly in all of the scientific papers that they write. It's all, you can see all the language, it's all language of creation, design, purpose, organization. It's impossible. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? So as I said, these people are witnessing the ayat of Allah, and it's their kibr that makes them reject what they're basically seeing, nothing else.
So their purpose is to misguide people. So
yeah,
what is that the purpose behind it?
Well, there is the dal, the one who's astray, and there is the mudil, the one who misguides others. Yes, there are those who misguide on purpose deliberately, and the other ones who are at the top who are the beneficiaries. They benefit from people being upon, you know, believing that there's no creator, no purpose, right? See, there's always false religion. This is false religion that they're upon, right? So the beneficiaries of false religion want to hinder the people from the message of the prophets and the book and the wisdom. Remember the book and the wisdom we mentioned at the beginning? The book and the wisdom brings with it what? Al-a'mal al-salihah, al-ulum al-nafi'ah, al-adab al-aliyah, al-aliyah, right? All the lofty manners, whatever. This is what prophets and messengers bring. But there are people who profit from the masses not being upon that, right? So they want to hinder people from religion because religion is a barrier to their profitability. So there are those who are the mudillun. They misguide upon knowledge deliberately with purpose. They know what they are doing, and they spread these ideas, right? All these lifestyle systems, lifestyle philosophies, and all the rest of it, whatever. Yeah, just play with the minds and akal of the people, mislead them, misguide them. There are people like that, yes. And so they benefit because they benefit financially. Remember, disbelief, kufr. A person disbelieves because of motives. He doesn't want to leave his wealth. He doesn't want to leave his authority or power. He doesn't want to leave his lusts and desires. Right? There are factors as to why people disbelieve.
How would you give dawah to the people of Deism, and is there levels to it, and is there different motives? For example, some people, they do believe that there's a creator, but they don't want to assign to religion. They'll try to say, no, it's man-made, as all of them are, and I don't want to ascribe to them. So how would you...
Yeah. Well, with deists, as we said, they reject what they call organized religion, and that's because of what they're dealing with is false, fabricated, muharraf, mubaddal religion, right? So they see so many gods, first of all, they see so many different religions, and then they try to bring like a naturalistic explanation as to how and why these religions appeared, or they try to give they try to claim that they're just forms of control, and they are just this, and they are just this, and they're just that, and whatever else. So they have shubhat of this nature as to why they don't accept what they refer to as organized religion. So to answer these people, you have to establish the evidences of prophethood, right? Because they believe that the Creator was just disinterested in His creation, as created it in the way that it was created, but then He's just got no interest whatsoever, and so therefore sent no books, sent no messengers, sent no whatever. So you have to focus upon the proofs of prophethood, the fact that many prophets and messengers, they claimed prophethood and received revelation, and these are more famous and more well known than any philosopher. Their status and their praise has been made great, and what they brought was all uniform and coherent. They brought something that was uniform and coherent, namely that there is creation, which the deist accepts, and that there is resurrection, and that there is accountability, right? So these 3 or 4 foundations have rational evidences. As for creation, he's already accepted that. As for resurrection, then resurrection, the proof of that is all around us in the continuous cycles of life and death and rebirth, and that's the evidence of the Quran. The evidence of the Quran is to argue for the resurrection by what we see of life, death, rebirth cycles in the life of this world, and so establish the proofs for resurrection and the proofs for prophethood, right? So in the Quran there are those proofs, there are those evidences. You have to revolve around those evidences to explain Prophet Muhammad, what he came with the Quran, where did it come from, and all the other the corollaries which come off from that, like the foreknowledge, ilmul ghaib that he was given, and all the other things that he basically came with, his sharia, and how it is beneficial for mankind. You can highlight the issues of alcohol, hijab, riba, things of that nature. So there are many aspects that you take in order to convince the deist that Allah Azza wa Jal did not neglect His creation. Right? That doesn't make sense, right? Rather, He is involved with His creation in the sense that He knows, He sends guidance and whatever else. So there are ways you can deal with the deist, and as you can see, their problem is just with religion aspect and not really the creator aspect. They accept the creator aspect. So it's more on religion and the aspects of prophethood, sharia, and resurrection. So you've got to look at the evidences for that. So each one is a topic in itself. The ahkam of the sharia, the benefits, wisdoms, the resurrection, proofs, evidences, prophethood, proofs, evidences. So that's how you'd focus on that.
No.
Yeah. Barakallahu feek. Say that again?
You know how you said that the earth believes that it actually spins?
Say that again?
My brother believes that it spins.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it does spin.
Well, first of all, in the Quran, it is clear that the phenomenon of day and night is by way of the motion of the sun. Right? So this is something that's not questionable. It's not under any dispute, because it's so clear and apparent in the verses of the Quran that to deny it becomes disbelief. As for now, you can have a model. You can develop a model by making anything stationary. This is what the scientists themselves say, right? So the current accepted science right now, and which it has been for 100 years, is that we don't know what is stationary and what is moving. It's all relative, right? So you can choose any place as being stationary. You can take the moon as being totally stationary, and then you can construct a model and build the mathematics, and all of it will work. You can't falsify it, right? So what you choose as the starting point of your model is something that's purely philosophical. It's something that purely down to you what you want to choose, right? This is what the actual current accepted science is, right? And stated by, physicists and scientists like, George Ellis and other people. This is what they're basically saying, right? So in other words, there's nothing in science today that can disprove a stationary Earth with everything else going around it. There's no evidence to disprove that. You can't actually disprove that. There's nothing to disprove it. However, it's just simply a matter of personal preference. So these obviously atheists, they prefer that the Earth is not the most important place. For their view, for their religion, which they have a deen, they have a religion, to them, they just prefer the view that actually Earth is not so special. It's spinning, and then it's moving, and then it's moving with the sun, and it's moving with the galaxy, and it's kind of in one insignificant part of the universe somewhere, whatever. This whole idea and this notion is something that just they prefer to have this model. But there's nothing scientific, even though they're going to claim they're going to start bringing evidences, there actually isn't. There isn't any scientific evidence that can establish that the Earth is actually moving. It's just a...
So what they say about satellites and stuff like that?
Now this is a whole different topic. I won't really want to go into that. Yeah, there are satellites that are in low Earth orbit, right? There's low Earth orbit, and then there's what's way beyond that. In low Earth orbit, there are satellites that are going around Earth. Yes, that's true, right? That's not a proof that the Earth is actually moving, right? Earth is totally stationary. If the Earth was moving as they claim, see, this is why the contradiction. I will show you just one contradiction to answer your question. They bring this evidence that the Earth is rotating. This evidence is called the Foucault pendulum, right? The Foucault pendulum. What they are basically saying is, if you have a huge hall and you have this metal wire, you have this huge steel ball, right? And if you imagine that was on the North Pole at the top of the Earth, so imagine here's the globe here, right? There's North Pole at the top, right? So imagine at the North Pole, and imagine at the North Pole you have a building where there's a huge 100-foot wire and there's a huge ball, and then you push that ball like this. You push that ball like this, yeah, in this line, like this, like that, yeah. So the ball's going to start moving forward, backward, like this, yeah, yeah. So what they're saying is, because the Earth is rotating, what's going to happen is that ball, if we're in this room, it's going to start going like this. It's going to start going like that. Then it's going to start going. So basically, it's going to do a whole circle around